Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto insults the council. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. Naruto groggily opened his eyes and immediately shut them again due to the sunlight streaming through the window. Wait, window? He thought. Slowly reopening his eyes he turned and saw that it was indeed a window that was letting the sunlight though. Looking past it he saw the Hokage monument in the distance that made his eyes widen. The last time he saw that was before Madara and his army had destroyed it in the war. That was one hell of a dream, he thought, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. That wasn't a dream kid, he heard. Naruto's head snapped up and he quickly did a quick scan of the room and saw that no one was there. Kyuubi? He shakily thought back. Oh come on Naruto, you know my name, Kyuubi is just a title. She said with mirth in her voice. That wasn't a dream? You really sent yous back in time? He asked. Yep, and if I remember right we're back to the day off that you had before team assignments. Akane said happily, while Naruto tried to get up but found that he couldn't move properly and fell flat on the floor. Akane, why can't I move right? He asked getting up only to fall again. Akane took a look through Naruto's eyes and almost burst out laughing at what she saw. It looked like every movement he made it looked like it was the movements of a bigger and older person. I'd say that your muscles are trying to move like they did when you were older, instead of being the way they were when you were 13. She said, trying to keep her laughter under control and utterly failing when Naruto fell face first and hit his head against the wall of his room. Ha ha, laugh it up if you don't want me to change the mindscape from a sewer to something nicer. He thought with a small smirk when Akane abruptly stopped and a surprised silence was in the link they shared when they communicated. Why you do that for me? After all that I put you through? Even if I was in a genjutsu? Akane asked in a surprised voice. Yeah I would, and it is because you were in a genjutsu that I'm doing this. Okay, this is starting to get annoying, pull me into the mindscape. Naruto said in a slightly annoyed voice at the end. He found that trying to walk around and talk to Akane to be too difficult. Alright, was the response he got before he felt a tugging sensation in the back of his mind and he went with it. Naruto's mindscape. Next thing he knew was that he was standing in front of Akane's cage. The only difference was the one standing there. Gone was the giant fox with 9 tails. Now standing in front of him just behind the bars was what he would describe as an angel due to her beauty. She had lush red hair with 2 fox ears pointing out, a slightly round face with pale unblemished skin, a small button nose, and blood-red eyes with slits for pupils, thin lips that were curled into a small smile. Looking down past her face he blushed at what he saw. She had borderline C-cup breasts, a flat-toned stomach, with nice curvy hips and long almost endless legs, and there were 9 red foxtails attached to her tailbone. Oh, and did I mention that she was as naked as the day she was born? Naruto stood there frozen to the bone, just staring at the beauty standing before him with a blush that would make tomatoes green with envy. Seeing his stunned and red face she giggled and asked, like what you see Naruto-kun? That did it, and he flew back with a geyser of blood coming out of his nose. Giggling quietly to herself she waited for him to get back up. When he finally come to again he found Akane still standing in her previous state of dress before turning around with a small blush on his face and asked, it's not that I don't, but could you at least put some cloths on? Looking down at herself she let out a small gasp before exclaiming, oh. Sorry, but it's been so long since I had to wear any clothes that I guess I forgot. She said with a blush on her face while inwardly thinking, I wonder if he did like what he saw though. She snapped her fingers and some cloths appeared on her frame. There, you can turn around now. Turning slowly, Naruto let out a sigh of relief when he saw that she was now dressed in a blue kimono with white snowflakes that accented her figure quite nicely. Yeah, now that I'm here I was going to explain why I was changing the mindscape. The reasons why I am is for the fact that when you were in a genjutsu, so the attack wasn't your fault. 2. I need to thank you for sending us back somehow, and finally 3. I don't think that a beautiful lady like yourself would like being in a sewer. He finished with a blush. Akane meanwhile had looked surprised at the last comment while thinking, Naruto-kun thinks I'm beautiful. Snapping out of her surprised state she replied, thank you for the compliment, and you're right, I don't like this sewer. But someone's mindscape represents the state that one's mind is in, so I don't think that it is possible for you to change it. The last part was said sadly. Naruto on the other hand smirked and simply said, asked while closing his eyes. You do know that I'm known for doing the impossible, don't you? What do you? She trailed at the end because the area around them had suddenly started to waver. It began changing from a wet and dark sewer to a lush green forest with a beautiful lake in the center and fox pups running around a meadow that was beside it. She gasped as she could hear birds singing in the distance, see a few nesting in nearby trees, smell the sweat scent of flowers in the meadow, and feel the air moving around her. She saw that the seal that held her had moved to be a small choker around her neck. Naruto in the meantime was concentrating hard to make the sewer that was his mindscape to what he wanted it to be like. He could tell it worked by the gasp that he heard from Akane. When he was done he opened his eyes and found that it was as he hoped it would be. Next thing he knew was that Akane had tackled him to the ground and was hugging him as if he was her lifeline, all the while muttering "thank you" with tears in her eyes. Naruto just chuckled softly and held her close, waiting for her to finish. When she had finished and gotten off of him she blushed. Sorry that I just tackled you. I just got so excited that She was stopped when Naruto put his finger to her lips. It's okay Akane-chan, I understand that you would be excited at being someplace different from that sewer. So there is no need to apologize. He said softly. Akane was frozen when she heard him add the Chan suffices to her name, but in her mind she was thinking, he called me Chan, does this mean that he likes me? But we only just met. While this was going through her mind Naruto was thinking, when did I start calling her Chan? Do I like her that way already? We just met though, but he pushed those thoughts out of his mind when he heard Akane speaking. Naruto-kun, I think that when you leave that you should get used to your younger body again, then go train to see what abilities you still have from the future and go to a ninja store to stock up on supplies and get a better outfit, because the truth is that orange jumpsuit looks terrible and is not suitable for ninjas because it's too bright and lacks stealth. Naruto just sighed at her before replying, yeah, I guess I better get a new outfit. I never liked the thing anyway, so I guess it's time to change my look. He said, and it was the truth, it was the only thing that the shopkeepers would sell him at a far price, but he wasn't going to spoil Akane's mood with that information. He stood up and said, well, I guess I better go and get used to my body, then go and do the rest of what needs to be done. Akane sighed sadly. She didn't want him to leave, but she knew that he must. Alright, but come back soon, she said sadly. Naruto just grinned and said, don't worry Akane-chan, I'll visit later tonight. That's a promise. Before he disappeared from the mindscape, Akane sighed sadly and muttered, hurry back Naruto-kun. Real world. Naruto sighed as he came back to the world of the wake. Well, I guess it's time to start training. He tried to get up and fell flat on his face. But first I've got to figure out how to work this damn body right. Getting used to his smaller body took a couple of tries, but after an hour or so he figured it out. Now he was roof jumping to the nearest training ground to check out what abilities he had kept from the future and what was lost to him. He knew that Sage Mode was out of the question until his body could handle it, or at the very least until he signed the Toad contract again. Rasen Shuriken was also out because he didn't have the chakra supply to fuel the technique, and he doubted that even if he could pull it off he would be able to keep his arm, since without Senjutsu he couldn't throw it, and if using it on Kakazu the first time broke his arm in his older body it would no doubt sever it in his younger. Some people would like to keep the limbs attached, thank you very much. He couldn't use Akane's chakra because it would alert nearby ninja, and his didn't think that younger body probably couldn't handle more than one tail before he went berserk. His chakra control was probably shoot to shit because this body had next to none at this point in time, and all that hard work down the drain. He thought inwardly, crying waterfall tears. He could definitely use the Rasengan since he had learned it the first time in this body, though it would be with the clone's help. The wind-style Rasengan was a big maybe, but the bright side was that he could throw it without Senjutsu. I can't believe that I only used it in combat once, and that was before the war. Then I really need a larger arsenal for Winjutsu. He thought with a sweat drop. The thought that his main techniques were the Shadow Clone, the Rasengan, and the Rasen Shuriken was ridiculous. It's amazing that he even lived as long as he had on those. Akane chose this time to speak up. Naruto-kun, you might have gotten another affinity when we went through time. I'm not sure, but it's a good chance it's fire since that's my element, and I sent a large amount of chakra through your body to do that. Oh, and you're at the training ground now, she said with a giggle at the end. Naruto's sweat dropped again at his laps. Thanks Akane-chan, and I'll check on that after I get my hands on some chakra paper, he thought before looking up and seeing that he had arrived at training ground 45. It had a forest of to the side, a large lake in the middle and a wide open field. He figured it would be a good place to train, seeing as nobody but Anko Mitarashi wanted to get too close to training ground 44, otherwise known as the Forest of Death. Sighing again, he made the hand sign for his most used jutsu and shouted out, "Shadow Clone Jutsu." There were numerous puffs of smoke before it cleared to show 200 shadow clones standing around him. His sweat dropped yet again. "Yep, my chakra control is defiantly shot to shit. I only meant to make 150. He thought before pulling himself together and handing out orders. "Alright, we have 1 day to get up to notch. I want you to divide into groups of 50. He waited for the clones to do just that before he continued, "You all." He pointed to the group to his right. "Have chakra control. Divide it to 5 groups of 10 and have one group do tree walking, another water walking, the next leaf balancing, the next leaf floating, and finally, senbon balancing." He finished before pointing to the group in front of him. "This group has wind manipulation. Divide into 2 groups and one will work on leaf cutting, the other has waterfall cutting." He pointed to the group to his left. "You all have Rasengan training. Try to make it one-handed." He turned to the group behind him. "The last group has the wind style. Rasengan, try to make it with only one clone to add the wind, the other will try to handle the shape manipulation. If you can't, then use the third clone to, at the very least, see if it is even possible to do the technique." He turned and addressed all the clones. "Now, dispel the best one from in the group every hour, now get to work." He finished in a shout. "Yes, boss." The clones shouted before running off to do their tasks, leaving only 25 behind. "And what are you all still doing here?" he asked the group. "Well," one brave clone spoke up, "there isn't any waterfall in this training ground." The clone finished with a nervous chuckle. Naruto looked up and saw that indeed the training field didn't have a waterfall. What it did have though was a large group of boulders beside the lake. Remembering what Yamato said about boulders being an option to cut if there wasn't a waterfall nearby, he got an idea. "Well, why not use the boulders instead of a waterfall then?" he asked. The clones' sweat dropped at their stupidity before replying with a meager, "Yes, boss," before setting off to their task of cutting boulders. Naruto sighed at them before setting off to find the nearest ninja library. When he got there, he went straight to the jutsu section and looked up wind and fire jutsu. Sitting down at a table and flipping through the tutorials to the main section of the wind jutsu of the book, he scanned the page until he found some that looked interesting. A jutsu called Great Breakthrough, Wind Style. Great Breakthrough, a relatively simple technique that creates a sudden gust of wind, but its scale varies greatly depending on the user. If used by a superior shinobi, it has enough destructive power to knock down a large tree. The wind from the squall can blow away all things in the user's line of sight. A variation of the technique involves a smaller blast of wind which gets ignited with flame. Hand signs are tiger, ox, dog, hare, and snake. This looks useful, he thought with a raised eyebrow at the technique's destructive power and the implications of the jutsu. Writing it down, he scanned farther down the page and found a powerful-looking one, Wind Style. Petal Dust Dance, a technique that allows the user to summon a cyclone of petals to attack their opponent. The user must remain in one spot for the use of the technique, so he or she can direct it anywhere they desire. Therefore, the user can increase the direction and power of the technique to the maximum as a last resort. Hand signs are tiger, hare, and dragon. His eyes widened as a memory hit him. This is the technique that the body switcher used on me when we were sent on that grave robber mission. He thought, flashing back to the mission where he met Sora, before writing down the description and hand signs for the technique before finding the last jutsu in the book, and the wind tutorials where most of it. Wind Style. Vacuum sphere. To operate this jutsu, the user takes a deep breath and then exhales several small blasts of wind chakra in such a manner that they are dispersed over an expansive range, enough to make it difficult to avoid them entirely without taking any damage. Due to the properties of this technique, the expelled blasts are capable of piercing into and potentially through an opponent's flesh when they collide, in a similar manner to how bullets function. Hand signs are rat, hare, and dog. Naruto raised a brow at the description. Odd, it sounds like a wind version of the Phoenix Flower Jutsu. He thought before Akane spoke through the link. Actually, Naruto-kun, it is, but the vacuum wave came first. I should know I'm the one who made the Phoenix Flower Jutsu and then showed it to the ninja. She said, surprising Naruto a bit. Well, I didn't expect that, was all he could say before picking up the fire style book. But instead of skipping the fire manipulation section, he read through them and found that it was similar to wind manipulation. All he had to do was superheat his chakra to burn a leaf. And the second step was to make a small pond boil or melt a boulder if a pond was not nearby. Reading further down, he came to the following. Warning: it is recommended that you have a water user nearby in case of fire spreading to nearby trees, flammable objects. Sighing quietly to himself, Naruto flipped to the jutsu section of the book and found that the first technique was the Phoenix Flower Jutsu. Must be a popular technique then, he thought, but sighed when he heard Akane giggling at his thought. You know I could change the mindscape back to the sewer, right? He asked and smirked when he heard he stop abruptly. You wouldn't, she dared. Try me. Akane no like sewers. Akane a good girl. Akane shouted childishly, curling into a little ball and sucking her thumb, similar to what a 2-year-old would do. Naruto's sweat dropped. Okay, I was joking, Akane-chan, just calm down, he said to her. She instantly stopped and pouted. You're no fun, Naruto-kun, she said before cutting the link. Naruto sighed again at her antics before reading the description of the jutsu. Fire style. Phoenix Flower Jutsu, a technique that creates a volley of small fireballs, which are sent flying in an unpredictable manner, assaulting the enemy. In addition, the flames are controlled with chakra, so avoiding them all is extremely difficult. Shuriken can also be concealed within the flames, creating an unexpected secondary surprise attack. Like the flames, the shuriken can be controlled with chakra. For the most part, however, this technique is used as a distraction. Hand signs are rat, tiger, dog, ox, hare, and tiger. Naruto's eyes widened at the use of the jutsu. While it wasn't the same as the vacuum wave, it was close enough. Now this would defiantly be useful, he thought, jotting it down and scanned for more techniques. Then he found Sasuke's most used technique, the fireball, fire style. Fireball jutsu, a technique where chakra needed inside the body is converted into fire, and expelled from the mouth either as a massive orb of roaring flame or as a continuous flamethrower. The scope of the attack is altered by controlling the volume of chakra that is mustered. The released flames will engulf their target, and leave a crater on the ground's surface. This technique apparently requires more than average chakra reserves, and most genin should not be able to do this technique. Hand signs are snake, tiger, monkey, boar, horse, and tiger. And most genin don't have the chakra reserves of cage ether, he thought with a smirk before it fell, then became a wide grin when the first memories of his clones came to him. The good news was that he could still do the Rasengan with the clone's help and the wind style. Rasengan could be made with only one clone and could throw it. But the bad news was that wind manipulation and chakra control groups hadn't made much progress. They could cut half the leaf, and a quarter of the boulders, but not much further than that, and the control groups could get up the tree, and could walk on water, but the leaf balancers and floaters couldn't get it right yet. Neither could the Senbon balancers. The damn needles kept flying off in different directions. Well, one more jutsu and then to the shopping, he thought while he wrote down the technique. Looking further into the book, he found a really powerful technique. He quickly scanned through the description and smirked before writing it down, folding the paper, pocketing it, and left, heading to the one store that he knew would give him service. Naruto smiled as he stood outside the 10 Points weapon shop. A small shop Tenten and her family owned. It looked small, but on the inside it was absolutely huge. Inside, the walls were lined with shelves and shelves of kunai, shuriken, ninja wire, swords, and just about any bladed weapon you could think of. But what few knew, and even fewer lived to tell, was that the entire shop was covered with enlargement seals. The reason Naruto knew this was that Tenten had confidentially told him and then threatened to castrate him if he ever told a soul the first time he came in. Needless to say, Naruto had vowed to never tell anyone. He would rather keep his man bits. Thank you. As he stood there, he thought back to when he had met the family of 3. He had been running for his life for what felt like the 1000th time and had hidden from the mob behind the shop. Tenten's father, who had heard some noise, had come to investigate. What he had found was a starving, skin and bones, 5-year-old Naruto Uzumaki wearing very torn up and dirty clothes that couldn't even be classified as rags. He had taken pity on him and had fed and sheltered him for the night. He had met Tenten that night too, and she had become his first and best friend. They only acted like they didn't know each other for appearance. It had hurt the most when he saw Madara kill her, and it broke his heart just thinking about it. He snapped out of his now turned painful thoughts when the second group of clones dispelled, transferring him their knowledge. He found that his chakra control had improved to the point to where the clones could balance a leaf on their hands and forearms but nowhere else. The Senbon balance was better, meaning that the clones could now balance a needle on 3 of their fingers, and the Rasengan took more time to do one-handed than with a clone, but it was improving. The wind manipulation was going well too. They were able to cut the leaves all the way through with their chakra now and had moved to the boulders, which could now be cut halfway through. Sighing to himself, he walked into the 10 points and immediately knew something was not right. The entire shop was deathly quiet. Nothing moved, and you could have heard a pin drop. It unnerved him. He almost jumped out of his skin when a hand was placed firmly on his shoulder. Turning slowly, he found that the hand belonged to Tenten. Said girl had an aurora of death around her, and Naruto swore that he could see the Shinigami hovering above her. Gulping, he nervously greeted her. "Hi T Tenten," he said with a stutter. Next thing that he knew was that she had whisked him into the storage room, tied him up, and placed a silencing seal on the door. "You," she pointed to him, "have some explaining to do, and if I'm not satisfied with your answer I will castrate you with a dull and rusty kunai." His eyes widened at this. "Got that?" He nodded, the fastest he ever had in his life. "Now care to explain why one moment I'm watching your fight against Madara?" His eyes widened. "And the next I'm waking up and I'm 14 again?" She finished with a scowl. If Naruto's eyes could get any wider they'd be rolling on the floor. "Akane-chan, how is this even possible? How could she even come back with me?" he asked desperately, trying to wrap his mind around the situation. "I don't know, Naruto-kun. The only thing that I can think of is that she was the closest one to you when my chakras surged through you and she got caught in the jutsu with you." She shakily explained. "T Tenten, I don't know what you're talking about." He tried to play it off as "I don't know what you're talking about and you just grabbed me, and tied me up for no reason, kind of thing. Don't play with me, Naruto." Tenten shouted. "I know you had something to do with this. I saw you at Training Ground 45 ordering your clones to do chakra control, wind manipulation, the Rasengan and its wind variants. If that isn't enough, I know you didn't know the secret to the shadow clone until you started wind manipulation," she said with a smirk as she knew she got him with that. Naruto knew that she got him. "Alright, you got me. What is it you want to know?" he sighed, asked. "Everything," she said with a grin. So he explained everything, how Madara had killed everyone, how he had went berserk and destroyed him, when he had met the real Kyuubi, and turned back the time. Everything to the point of now, and I guess you being the nearest me when I collapsed got wrapped in Akane-chan's chakra," he finished. Tenten rubbed her chin with a thoughtful look as she processed what she had just heard. "So let me get this straight, Madara killed us all." Naruto nodded. "You lost control of the Kyuubi's chakra," he nodded again. "Destroyed every inch of him with a massive Rasen Shuriken," a nod. "Then you collapsed and ended up in your mindscape and met the Kyuubi, who by the way is a female and is named Akane. Found out that she was under a genjutsu and that she knew your mother," another nod. "She then sent her chakra through you to turn back the clock 5 years, another nod. And me being the closest to you when you collapsed ended up getting wrapped up in the chakra to do said time travel," a nod again. "And then you found that Kyuubi's human form is a smoking hot vixen woman," again a nod. "And you have feelings for her," a nod. "Wait, what?" he asked with a blush. "You can't fool me, Naru-kun. I saw the blush you had when you were talking about Akane-san," she said with a smirk. "Is it really that obvious?" Naruto asked in dismay. "Yeah, it is," Tenten said with a sigh, then asked something that completely blew his mind. "Can I meet her?" Huh? He stuttered with wide eyes. "Oh come on, Naruto-kun, how many people can say that they've met the strongest being on the planet who just so happens to be a female? So can I meet her? Please," with a cherry on top, she said with the puppy dog eyes and her lower lip pouting at him. "I must resist the look, but it's so cute. No, I must resist the look." He thought, desperately trying to resist her look. He was having relative success until Tenten added tears to her eyes. No, not the teary eyes. He thought, crying anime tears as his defenses fell and he gave in. "All right, just untie me first. These ropes are a little tight," he said in pain at the last bit. "Oh sorry," she said, smiling sheepishly and undoing the ropes. After she had untied them, Naruto got up, Alright, I'll let you meet her. Tenten smiled brightly at that, but not here. Walk with me to training ground 45 after I've restocked my supplies and gotten a better outfit, then I'll let you meet her, okay? He said, asked quickly, seeing her expression go from happy to dangerous then to contemplative in a matter of seconds. Sighing to herself she asked, that's probably the best I'm going to get, isn't it? Pretty much, yeah, Naruto said with a smirk. Oh, alright, just hurry up, Tenten said with dangerous expression, ripping the silencing seal off the door and letting him out. Okay, he said quickly, jumping out of the closet, grabbing 4 sets of kunai, and 5 sets of shuriken before turning and heading to the clothing section. Grabbing some that caught his interest, he headed to the changing room. Setting his equipment down on the bench beside them, he entered and changed into the new clothes. Wow, Tenten said with a blush staining her face and some blood dripping from her nose when she caught sight of Naruto in his new outfit. What he was wearing was a skin-tight, fishnet shirt that showed his developing muscles and six-pack abs, black Anbu-style pants that stopped about mid-calf and had tape going from where they stopped down to his feet that were in black shinobi sandals, fingerless gloves that had a metal plate on them, similar to Kakashi's. He had changed the cloth to his headband to black, similar to his Shippuden one. As she got a closer look at him, her thoughts went into perverted territory. Even Akane, who had been a blushing mess when she had heard Naruto's semi-confession of having feelings for her, was having trouble controlling her blush and thoughts at Naruto's new look. Wait, do I even like him that way? She asked herself. As she was having her inner conflicts, Naruto had moved to Tenten and was waving his hand in front of her face. Hello, Konoha to Tenten, are you there? He asked, snapping his fingers in front of her face. Huh? She asked, coming out of her daze and blushing even more when she saw how close Naruto was to her. I asked if you okay? He said with concern visible in his eyes. Oh, why yeah, I'm fine, she stuttered. Good, he said, leaning back with a smile before he turned a bit nervous. Tenten, where do you keep the chakra paper? Akane said that I might have gained a secondary element and I'd check if I did. He said, a bit sheepishly, rubbing the back of his neck, creating an image that Tenten squealed, kawaii, at in her mind. Tenten somehow pulled herself together to reply, if a bit shakily, I was just about to get them when you walked in. She walked back into the storage room. Naruto sighed as she walked back out with a couple of packages of chakra paper. In this story they're sold in packs, and proceeded to place them on a nearby empty shelf, leaving one out for both him and her. Seeing the extra pack out, Naruto was about to ask when she answered for him. What, can't I train in my elements too? I mean, if you gained another affinity I could have too, you know. She is right, Naru-kun, she could have also gained a secondary element, but it would probably be weaker than yours, seeing as she wasn't the target for the jutsu. Akane said through the link. Naruto's eyes widened at this before sighing and saying in a quiet voice, I guess we might as well see if you did then, Tenten. Akane-chan says that it's a possibility. Much to Tenten's joy, alright, let me just ring this up and then we'll be on our way. She said excitedly, walking over to behind the register and ringing up his total. Alright, your total is 747 yen and 39 cents. I don't know how much that really is, so I just put down a number. Naruto sighed, paying for his purchase. Okay, let's go now, it's starting to get late. He stopped abruptly and grabbed his head in pain, when another group of clones dispelled. Seeing her friend's condition, Tenten rushed to his side and worriedly asked, you okay? Yeah, I'm fine, just too many clones dispelling at once is all. Naruto said before muttering something that Tenten thought sounded like, stupid clones and their pranks, causing her to giggle. When asked about it she said, nothing, just thought of something funny, through barely held giggles. Turning towards the back of the shop, Tenten shouted, Dad, I'm going out for a bit, and received a muffled okay. With that they walked out. Training grounds. Okay, we're here, Naruto said, walking on to the training ground. Tenten, seeing the shadow clones still training in their respectable tasks, whistled, that's not as many as I've seen you make, but it's still impressive. She complimented, you should have seen it before the last 3 groups dispelled. Now we're here for a reason, aren't we? Naruto began with a smirk but finished with a serious expression as both he and Tenten took out a slip of chakra paper. You go first, Naruto. I know what they do, but I've never seen it before except with my earth nature. Tenten said. Naruto nodded, pushing his chakra into it. What happened was a bit of a surprise. The paper splitting wasn't, nor was one half being burnt to a crisp. What was surprising was that the last split in half again and the top piece crinkled into a small ball, and the bottom got so soggy that it was basically mush. How is that possible? I expected the wind and fire but not the lightning and water. Akane-chan, how is it that I have 4 affinities? He said, asked and then thought to Tenten and then Akane. I don't know. Tenten said in disbelief. I thought that this might happen. Akane said more to herself than to Naruto, but he still heard her. What do you mean? Sighing to herself she began explaining. What I meant was that I thought that your chakra reserve would increase to the point that you would get your parents' affinities as your mother had water and your father had lightning. She finished, so the fact that my chakra control is shot is that my reserve increased, not that my body has none at this point in time? He asked. Not entirely, but mostly it's the fact that at the moment your chakra control sucks. She said with a giggle. A vein popped on Naruto's head and his eyebrows started twitching in annoyance. Breathing deep to calm himself, he turned to Tenten, who had looked at him for an explanation. Sighing to himself he explained, Akane-chan says that the reason I have 4 natures instead of 2 is that my reserves increased so much that I gained both my parents' natures, mom being water, dad the lightning. Right, she said in an amazed voice before something clicked. Hey Naruto-kun, could the same have happened to me? She asked, making his eyes widen. Before you ask, yes, it's possible, Slim. But possible, and that her chakra reserves could now rival yours when you were this age, now not counting. Akane said. Akane-chan says that it is slim but not impossible and that your reserves could rival mine when I was originally 13. That was close to cage level, so looks like you got some control training to do. Naruto told her with a smirk, making her groan. Well, we'll worry about that later. Let's take a look, Naruto said, making her nod before pushing chakra into the paper. What happened was another surprise. It split in half. One half crumbled, the other split again. One part got soggy and the other burnt to ashes. Okay, so that's earth, fire, wind, and water. My dad has water. Akane gave me fire. Earth was my original and I'm guessing that my mom gave me wind. It looks like your earth and wind are strongest though, seeing as the wind happened twice and there's nothing left of the earth but dust. Naruto said. He began to think out loud when something crossed his mind. If her reserves are large enough, what's stopping me from? What was that? Tenten interrupted. I was just thinking that since your reserves are large enough I could teach you the shadow clone jutsu. He explained with a wide grin that Tenten quickly mirrored when she got his line of thought. Please Naruto-kun, teach me the shadow clone. It'll make training so much easier. She all but demanded. I was going to anyway, Tenten-chan. Since we're in this together we need to get as strong as we can, as fast as we can. Because I am not letting you all die again, Naruto said with a determined fire burning in his eyes. Tenten however blushed when she heard the suffix added to her name, a fact that Naruto missed, but Akane noticed, since when he called me, her Tenten-chan? They both thought, one with a blush, the other with a slight growl. Naruto of course was as oblivious as ever. Naruto-kun, can we get on with the lesson please? Akane said in a sickly sweet voice that could melt ice. Why yes Akane-chan, he thought nervously. Right, listen carefully Tenten, he said, snapping her out of her thoughts. As he started to explain the jutsu and its workings. An hour later. So that's how the shadow clone jutsu works. He finished explaining. He looked over to see Tenten with wide eyes and her mouth wide open. You know, if you don't close your mouth you'll catch flies in it. That snapped her out of her surprised state. That was surprising Naruto-kun, you actually went into detail and explained things that even I didn't know about the jutsu. How'd you find all that out? She asked. Naruto snorted. You do know how I graduated, right? He asked rhetorically. Oh right, sorry. She said sheepishly. It's alright, besides you know I'm smarter than I look. I know, she sighed sadly, remembering how they had met. Now how about giving the jutsu a try? He asked. Yeah, she said, pounding her fist into her open hand. Putting her hand in the cross seal, she shouted out, Shadow Clone Jutsu. There were numerous puffs of smoke and when it cleared all they could do was stare. This was unexpected. This was unexpected, Naruto said in disbelief as he stared at the numerous Tentens standing in the field. There were 150 of them. No shit Sherlock. One of the Naruto clones who had stopped training to view the event said. Growing at tick mark, Naruto hit it over the head and dispelled it, gaining its knowledge. Tenten, who had been staring at her copies, snapped out of her state at the sound of the clone dispelling. I made this many and don't even feel winded. she said in a shocked voice. Yeah, your reserves are defiantly rivaling mine when I was originally 13. Naruto said with a chuckle but then turned serious. Now it's my turn. He said, putting his hands in his favorite seal, Shadow Clone Jutsu. He shouted, creating 100 of his own. Attention! A clone shouted, snapping into a salute, and all the clones, Tentens too, mimicked it. Sweat dropping at their clones' antics, Naruto started handing out orders. Alright everyone. We have a lot of training to do and a short time to do it in. He started, I need you all to divide into groups of 25 each and pair up with a group of Tentens clones. He waited for them to do so. Group 1. He pointed to the group of the pair's clones on the left. We'll start Tenten on her wind manipulation and then join in with my own. We need it as strong as we can possibly get it. He pointed to the group in front. Group 2 will start with the wind jutsus that we picked up earlier. He turned to the group on the right. Group 3 will start on fire manipulation. He turned to the group behind them. Group 4 will work on the fire jutsus. Turning to one of the groups of Tenten's clones, he said, Group 5 will work on Tenten's earth manipulation. He pointed to the last group of 25 Tenten, and Group 6 will work on chakra control. Start with the basics and then move to the more difficult ones. He turned to Tenten. Anything you want to add, Ten-chan? He asked, getting a blush for the use of a nickname for her. Getting herself together, she replied. Not that I can think of, but keep the instructions simple for my clones, and to those working on earth manipulation you know what to do, so no slacking off. She said it first to Naruto, then to his clones and then to her clones, who all nodded. Naruto addressed all the clones. Now, get to work. He shouted, getting a yelled, yes boss. Before they all set out on their tasks. He turned back to Tenten. How much chakra do you have left? He asked. She smirked and answered him, that wasn't even half my new reserve. She said a little smugly. Good, then make one more clone. He said, making another copy of himself. This got a raised eyebrow from her, but she complied nonetheless. He turned to the two clones. Alright, you two will be going to the library to check out the basics for lightning and water manipulation. Then check for ninjutsu. Write each your own copy, then come back and dispel. Got all that? He finished. Yes boss, was his reply from his copy. He got a simple yes from Tenten's clone before they set off. Naruto faced Tenten, who was staring at him wide-eyed. Something on my face? He asked with a grin. No. It's just that I didn't know that you could be so commanding. She said with a small blush staining her cheeks. Sighing quietly, Naruto sat down and motioned to Tenten to do the same. So how do I bring someone into my mindscape with me, Akane-chan? He asked over their link, after Tenten had sat beside him. Thinking for a minute, Akane remembered how Kushina had brought Minato into her mindscape once when Minato, wanted to meet her. Akane. If I remember this right, you should join hands and put your foreheads together and let me do the rest. She explained, after Naruto had relayed the message to Tenten and had done as instructed. She pulled them in Naruto's mindscape. Opening her eyes, the first thing that Tenten saw was that she was in a clearing of forest that was surrounded by a lake, meadows, and all kinds of wildlife, but mostly foxes. Her eyes widened when she turned to Naruto. What she saw was that he was in his older form, something Naruto seemed to miss on his last visit. Opening his eyes, he saw that Tenten was staring at him with wide eyes. Okay, what now? He asked with a sigh. Why, you're in your older F form, she stuttered. Naruto's eyes widened before he noticed that Tenten was in hers too. So are you, he said in shock, making her eyes widen. So you finally noticed Naruto-kun? Said a voice off to their right. Looking over to the voice, they found Akane sitting against a tree smirking at them. Noticed what? Naruto asked, confused. Sighing at his lack of attention, she said, that since we've come back, that whenever you come to the mindscape you're in your older body. Their eyes widened even further at this. But how is that possible? Tenten stuttered, drawing Akane's attention to her. Akane's eyes narrowed at her. So this is the other one that likes Naruto, she thought, but on the outside she replied with a strained smile. The reason why you're both in your older forms is that your mind matures at a faster rate than your bodies. So when we came back, to put in simple terms, is that basically your older minds were merged with your younger bodies. That's why you had a hard time moving this morning, Naruto-kun. Your mind was more adapted to your older form than it was to your younger. That drew looks of understanding from the both of them. Now if you will excuse us, Naruto-kun, I do believe Tenten-san and I need to have a chat. she said, snapping her fingers, and both her and Tenten vanished in a small pop. Okay? That was weird, Naruto said, a confused expression on his face. Different part of Naruto's mind. Tenten was confused. 1 minute she was sitting in front of Naruto when Akane snapped her fingers, and the next she was in a completely different place. To skip the description, it's the place Minato took Naruto to talk when Naruto had released his 8-tailed form. Standing in front of her was Akane, who had her hands on her hips and had a frown on her face. Okay, what was it you wanted to talk about? She asked, a little nervous. I want to know what your intentions for Naruto-kun are, she all but demanded. Tenten's eyes widened at her. She got what she meant, but she tried to play it off as if she didn't know what she was talking about. What do you? Don't play with me, girl. I've seen how you look at him when he's not looking. I'm all for sharing, but I will not allow anyone to be with him if they intend to do him harm, she exclaimed, then widened her eyes at her slip up. She had basically admitted to having feelings for Naruto and that she didn't mind sharing him either all in one go. Meanwhile, Tenten was both wide-eyed in shock and happy at the same time. Shocked that the Kyuubi liked Naruto that way, and happy that she was willing to share him. Yes, she had realized a long time ago that she had feelings for Naruto. It had been during his 3-year trip. She hadn't noticed it right away, but she had been spending a lot more time thinking about him, missing him. Hell, she even went to the village gate every day to see if he was back yet, and it had hurt that she was away from the village when he returned. But when she had saw him on the Gaia, Fem. Gara, retrieval mission, her heart had nearly popped out of her chest, and she almost couldn't control her blush when she saw how hot he had become. That, and she had just barely controlled the impulse to take him right then and there. Blushing at where her thoughts had gone to, she snapped out of it and saw that Akane had been staring at her intently. Don't worry, I don't intend to hurt him in any way, shape, or form, she said. Good, then we won't have a problem, and you don't need to worry, Naruto likes you too, she said, causing Tenten to blush but almost squeal in joy. Yes, having access to her host's thoughts had its benefits. But I get him first, Akane said with a perverted smile. Oh come on, you're no fun, Tenten pouted. Akane smirked to her before her expression turned thoughtful. Now the only problem is how to make him ours, she thought out loud, and then an idea popped into her head. She gained a devious look. I think I'm gonna like the idea you have if the look on your face is to go by, Tenten said. Oh, you will, but in order for this to work we're going to need at least one more girl, 2 tops. Tenten just smirked at this. I really wouldn't mind that. I mean, I've seen some of the other girls that like Naruto-kun, and trust me when I say I wouldn't mind sharing him, especially with that Suna Kunoichi Gaia. Besides, with the way his life has been, Naruto needs all the love he can get, she said with a perverted smile. Yes, Tenten was secretly bi and had a bit of a crush on Gaia. But the only one she would ever love and give herself to would be one Naruto Uzumaki. However, that didn't mean that she wouldn't look and appreciate what the female body had to offer. Akane blushed at the implications of what Tenten said before turning serious. They discussed their plan and decided that they would make their moves when the opportunities presented themselves. They smiled evilly, nodding at one another before Akane snapped her fingers and they rejoined Naruto. Main part of the mindscape. Naruto had been sitting in the same spot for the better part of an hour and had been getting bored before he heard the 2 girls reappear. Turning to them, he caught sight of their smiles and gulped nervously. He didn't like those looks at all. So how'd it go? He asked with a stutter. Very good, wouldn't you say, Ten-chan? Akane said, asked with a grin. Oh yes, very, very good, Akane-chan, Tenten said with a grin of her own. Anything I need to know? Naruto asked. All in due time, Naru-kun, Tenten said. I see, he sighed. We need to get back to training, Tenten. Yeah, I guess you're right. She turned to Akane. Well, Akane-chan, it was nice meeting you and thank you for, she said with a small blush and a wink. Yes, nice meeting you and you are very welcome, Akane said with a wide grin, pushing them out of the seal. Outside the mindscape. Well, now that that's over with, we might as well start the physical training, Naruto said with a slight frown. Out of all the things that the shadow clones could do, it couldn't transfer physical abilities. Use the physical abilities of the original? Yes. Transfer new? No. Yeah, I guess, but they should have invented a seal to go with this jutsu, she said, trailing off slowly at the end when she saw Naruto's eyes steadily getting wider. When Tenten had said that, Naruto had gotten an idea. What if he could make a seal to switch the knowledge transference to physical transference? The answer was so simple yet so hard at the same time because as to make the actual seal would take more talent than he currently had with seals. But hey, he wasn't an Uzumaki for nothing. Naruto suddenly jumped up, grabbed her and wrapped her in a hug and started to jump up and down wildly. Tenten. I could just kiss you, he shouted. Tenten meanwhile blushed with a small smile and Akane just smirked. Now's her chance. They both thought as Tenten put her arms on Naruto's shoulders to stop him from jumping, and smashed her lips against his. Naruto's eyes widened when he felt her lips against his. Tenten was kissing him. He couldn't believe it. He had liked her for a while before the time jump but had never expected this to happen. But now he was confused. He knew he liked Akane too, and he didn't know what to do. One part of his mind was telling him that this was wrong and that he should stop this, but another was telling that part to shut the hell up and enjoy it. Naruto being Naruto listened to his instinct, which was the part that was telling the other to shut up and enjoy. So he leaned into it. Tenten was surprised when Naruto, who she was expecting to push her away, instead leaned in and started to move his lips in sync with her own. To her she was in heaven, she was kissing the boy no man of her dreams. Deciding to take this up a notch, Naruto parted his lips and licked her lower lip, asking for entrance. Tenten was surprised even more when she felt Naruto's tongue rubbing her lower lip and gladly let him in. In a battle of tongues they explored each other's mouths. To Tenten's surprise, Naruto's mouth tasted not like ramen, like she had expected, but oranges and grapes mixed. To Naruto, Tenten's mouth tasted like cherries. Moaning, Tenten pulled away, earning a disappointed groan from Naruto. That was my first kiss, she shakily said. Naruto's eyes widened at this. It was mine too, he said, blushing brightly. The kiss with Sasuke never happened. Tenten looked down and then, noticing their position, it seemed that somehow she had ended up straddling Naruto's waist and had her hands on either side of his head. Naruto looked to the side when he noticed their position and saw that their clones had gathered to watch the show. Looking back up to her, he said, Tenten? Yeah? It looks like we have an audience. Naruto gestured with his head to the gathered clones. She looked over to said clones, who seemed to realize that they had been spotted and rushed back to their tasks. You Tenten, see, could you get up? Not that I don't love to have a beautiful woman such as yourself on top of me, but this could cause unwanted problems if someone were to see us like this. Naruto said with a sheepish smile. Blushing at the compliment, Tenten sighed but complied. So, what does this make us now? Naruto asked nervously, not sure what to do after all that. This would make you my boyfriend. And before you ask, yes, Akane knows about your feelings toward her as well as me, and it goes the same for us towards you, Tenten said, smirking. She leaning in and whispered huskily into his ear. Just to let you know, I don't mind sharing, and neither does she. Naruto's eyes widened for what felt like the 100th time today and asked inwardly, Akane-chan, is this true? There was a moment of silence before. Yes, Naru-kun, it is. Akane said quietly. Then does this mean that you want to be with me as well? Why yes, she stuttered shyly. Naruto couldn't believe that not only did he get not one but two super hot girlfriends, and all in one day too. Naturally he did the only thing he could in this situation. He fainted due to an overloaded brain and a megawatt smile on his face. Later that night, after Naruto had regained consciousness, he couldn't stop smiling. Even through the physical workout from hell that he put them through that day, whenever they looked at each other they would both have that shit-eating grin. It seemed the clones they had made to go to the library had seen fit to drop their jutsu lists at their respective homes and dispelled. Though the list seemed interesting, several lightning, water, and more fire jutsu for the both of them, there did not seem to be too many wind jutsu, seeing as was the rarest element and Konoha didn't have that many users of said element. Even at the end of the day they could say they were at the very least half as skilled as they were before the war. Naruto having several more jutsu down now than before, even more so. Though they'd have to remember to ask either Gaia or Tamari for some wind jutsu when the invasion was over. Naruto's face darkened at the thought of the invasion, the thing that had started most of his pain, losing his Gigi, Sasuke's defection, and him ultimately completing his Nindo. He had so many things to prevent. Sasuke getting the cursed seal, Gigi dying, and now that he thought about it, Kakashi's favoritism, as that and seeing Naruto getting stronger had driven Sasuke over the edge. Overall he and Tenten had a lot of hard work and training to do. Naruto had walked Tenten home to the 10 points, hand in hand, and she had left him after a fierce makeout session and a promise to meet up the next day. Before walking inside with a small blush. All in all, a very productive day were his last thoughts before going to sleep, anticipating the next day. Naruto woke up in a very good mood. Until he remembered what today was, that is, team assignment day. He thought at the memories of what happened the first time around and his mood soured even more. Calm down, Naruto-kun, they'll get what's coming to them. Akane said, referring to his two future teammates. Yeah, I guess. Hey, pull me in for a minute, Akane-chan. She raised a brow but did as asked. When he got there, he walked right up to her and pulled her down into a kiss that quickly turned into a fierce tongue duel. After a couple of minutes, he pulled back from a shocked and red-faced Akane. What was that for? She asked breathlessly. What, can't I kiss one of my girlfriends? He asked with a grin. No. I mean, She was left a stuttering mess as he chuckled and put a figure to her lips to quiet her. I was joking, don't take it so seriously, Akane-chan, he said softly. Blushing even more, she pouted at him. You're no fun, Naruto-kun. Just for that I won't offer you the surprise that could solve your Rasen Shuriken problem, she said, turning away from him with a smirk. Naruto's eyes widened. Why, you found a way around the Rasen Shuriken? He shakily asked. Yep, but since you've seen fit to tease me, I won't tell you, she said with her back still turned to him. Naruto got down on his knees and clasped his hands in front of his chest. Please, Akane-chan, tell me. I'll do anything you ask. Quirking an eyebrow, she turned to him. Anything? She asked. Yes, anything, he repeated with a pleading expression. Maybe if you, she bent down to whisper in his ear, kiss me again. His eyes widened before he pulled her down to him, claimed her lips with his and kissed her passionately yet again. You know, if you wanted another kiss, all you had to do was ask, he said with a small grin after he had pulled back. I know, but I had to pay you back somehow after that, Akane said with a grin of her own. Akane-chan? Naruto started slowly. She indicated that she was listening. Did you really mean what you said about finding a way around my Rasen Shuriken problem? He asked somewhat excitedly. Yeah, I did, she said with a big grin. What is it? Akane stood in thought for a moment before speaking. As you know, you need a summoning contract to use Sage Mode, right? Naruto nodded. Well, what if I told you that a certain clan of summons had the same thing? His eyes nearly popped out of his head, and that I was the boss of said clan? He raised a shaking finger at her. Why, you mean that there's a Fox clan and that they have Sage Mode? He asked in an equally shaken voice. Yes, there is. The Toads are actually close allies with us, and they shared some of their techniques with us, Senjutsu being one of them, she finished with a smirk. Next thing she knew was that Naruto had tackled her and was now raining her face in kisses, all the while saying thank you. Getting control of himself, he realized what he was doing and quickly got up, pulling Akane with him. Sorry, he said sheepishly. It's all right, Naruto-kun. I understand, she said with a chuckle. So are you willing to sign it? She asked before noticing his hesitant look. Yes, you could resign the Toad contract too, Akane said, rolling her eyes. How would that be possible? I thought that someone could only have one contract, he asked in confusion. Normally, yes, they could only have one, seeing as summonings are far and few between. But if one were to have two allied contracts and they agreed to have the same summoner, then it is possible to have more than one contract, and since I'm the boss of the Fox clan and I agree, you could defiantly have the Toad summons again, Akane explained to a now stunned Naruto. Said blonde's stunned look ever so slowly changed from stunned to a small smile, then to a shit-eating grin that could have been seen from space. Gathering her hands in his, Naruto got down on one knee. Akane-chan, have I ever told you how much I love you? Akane blushed a red that would make a tomato seem pale. And no, I don't think that you have. He raised an eyebrow. I haven't? Well, I'll just have to correct that mistake by saying it every day until I am worthy of your love, he said playfully. But getting back to business. Yes, I will sign the contract for the Fox clan, he said back to serious mode. Very well then, Naruto, you know how to sign it, so I don't think that I have to explain that part. But this contract has a different seal sequence than the regular, Akane explained, getting her blush under control and summoning the contract to her side with a flick of a tail. Different seal sequence? Naruto asked. Yes, even I don't know why. But I figure that it's because each tailed beast has a summoning clan and each seal sequence for their contracts differ from the norm. In truth, the Sage of Six Paths had decided the hand seals for the summoning clans of the tailed beasts were to be different than the normal contracts. The reasons not even the beasts themselves knew. Now sign the contract and I'll tell you the hand signs. Akane said, handing Naruto the large scroll. Unraveling it, Naruto noticed that he would be the first fox summoner. Biting his thumb until it bled, he signed it, then pressing his still bleeding thumb to each of his other fingers, he left an imprint of each of his fingers on the contract. Congratulations, Naruto-kun, you are now the first summoner of the Fox clan, she said with a proud smile. Now the hand signs are dog, horse, ox, horse, tiger, and fox, she said, showing him the last seal. It looked similar to the dragon seal, but the ring fingers were straight with the tips touching and the thumbs apart. Naruto nodded to her as a thought struck him. Hey, Akane-chan, would it be possible for Ten-chan to sign it too? Yes, it would. In fact, I was hoping that you would ask. Because if she does want to sign, I'd be more than happy to accept her as my clan's second summoner, she said. Just as Naruto was about to say something, Akane interrupted, realizing the time. Naruto-kun, I'm sorry, but you need to get to the academy. You've been in here so long that you barely have time to get ready, she said, pushing him out of the mindscape. Outside the mindscape, coming to and finding that he was still lying on his bed, Naruto looked over to the clock and saw he barely had over 20 minutes to get there. Jumping out of bed, he ran to the bathroom, stripping out of his night clothes, quickly showered, changed into his new clothes that he got the day before, and left. While he was on his way, he saw Tenten walking with her team. Guy not being present because of team assignments. Smirking to himself, he rushed past, just barely missing them. What was that? Neji Hyuga, the team's resident arrogant ass and deep believer in fate, coughed through the smoke. I don't know, but that person's flames of youth are burning brightly. If I cannot match them, I will run around the village 100 times on my hands, and if I can't do that, I will. Lee was cut off by Tenten's fist impacting his head. Jeez, Lee, that's enough, she exclaimed, annoyed at his exuberance. I'm so going to get you for that, Naruto-kun. All that just to hand me a note? She thought, slipping her hand into her pocket where said note was currently at. Naruto meanwhile had just managed to get to the academy with 5 minutes to spare. A new record. That's 5 minutes faster than the last time, he thought with a smirk, walking into the classroom as seeing that he was one of the last to arrive. He almost froze at seeing all his friends again, but he had been prepared for the shock of seeing them, even if it still hurt. These were the friends that didn't know what it meant to be a shinobi, the ones that were still naive to the world around them, and this time he would save them. Sitting down at the back of the class, he started a conversation with Akane through the link. So Akane-chan, anything I should know about the Fox Sage mode? He asked, somewhat curious about it. Taking a moment to gather her thoughts, she started to explain. The Fox Sage mode is in essence the same as the Toad's, with a few minor differences. Such as instead of the bar-like pupil, it is instead a vertical slit. And the pigment around the eyes is a darker shade of red instead of orange. But once you gain the Toad contract again, you should be able to switch between the two looks, maybe even combine them. 1. His eyes glazed over and thought about all the information. So I'd be able to throw the Rasen Shuriken again, thus losing the risk to my arm. That could really come in handy, especially against Orochimaru, he thought. That's why I gave you the contract, Naruto-kun. We need you as strong as we can get you in Sage mode as a big advantage. Akane explained her reasonings behind the contract. That, and I think that it's time that the Foxes finally had a summoner. Just as Naruto was about to reply, he heard a rumbling and knew what that meant. The fangirls are coming, he shivered. He was glad that he didn't have any at this point in time. Yes, he had had a fan club after the pain attack, and it wasn't enjoyable. He could honestly say it was the only thing he had never envied Sasuke for. To him, fangirls were useless excuses of kunoichi. The only exception being Ino, who took her training seriously. The door burst open and in came the tidal wave of Sasuke's fangirls, said Imo, who had been sitting quietly in his corner brooding, ignored them. And right after a fight had broken out at who would sit next to the said Imo, Iruka Amino, the class teacher, came into the room. After the Chunin had surveyed the scene, his sweat dropped. Good morning class, please take a seat, he said. Said class ignored him. He grew a tick mark before smirking and performing a hand sign. I said shut up and take a seat, he shouted, his head enlarging to the point that it was twice its normal size, his patented, demon-headed jutsu. That got the class, mostly the arguing fangirls, to calm down and do as instructed. Now that that is over with, I can start with the team placements. Team 1 is. Naruto tuned out the unimportant ones that he knew wouldn't pass their real graduation tests until it came to the ones he remembered. Team 7 is Sasuke Uchiha. Sakura Haruno. There was a loud screech of, "Ha, told you pig, he's mine." And Naruto Uzumaki. There was an even louder screech from the Banshee again. What? But Iruka's sensei, Naruto Baka, didn't even pass his graduation exam. She said in a mixture of disbelief and anger. Actually, I did pass. It seems that I have too much chakra to control for the normal clone jutsu, so the Hokage gave me a more chakra-consuming clone technique, which I was easily able to perform. Naruto spoke from his corner in the back of the room. Yeah right, Baka, stop lying and get out of here, Sakura screeched, jumping up to punch him. Naruto, seeing it coming, dodged, grabbed her arm, twisted it behind her back, and pinned her against the wall. We may be teammates and I may be willing to work with you, Sakura-san, but your days of abusing me are over. I never liked you to begin with, so why should I let you continue it any longer? Naruto spoke to her in a cold voice that sent shivers down the class's spines. And as for me lying about having too much chakra, it's true, as I have never been able to perform the regular clone technique, and the one you just tried to punch is a copy of me. Spoke a voice above them. The class looked up to see Naruto sitting on the roof upside down. The girls blushed at his new look and most of the guys muttered, "Show off." As you can see, he is indeed telling the truth, Sakura-san. Now could you tell your clone let her go, Naruto? Iruka asked in a calm voice. He had known the real Naruto had been there the entire time. Though, he had almost missed him. Naruto just looked at the scared Chunin for a moment before looking towards his clone that nodded and dispelled in a poof. Now that the distraction is over with, Team 8 is Shino Aburame, Kiba Inuzuka, and Hinata Hyuga. Since Team 9 is still in circulation from last year, Team 10 is Ino Yamanaka, Choji Akamichi, and Shikamaru Nara. Your senseis will be here in an hour, so use that time to get to know your teammates and have lunch. And I would like to congratulate you all for making it this far in your careers. Iruka finished before walking out of the room. Naruto jumped down from the roof, drawing everyone's attention to him before walking to the door and turning to the rest of the room. I don't know about you all, but I've got someone to meet for lunch, so see you all in an hour, he said and walked out of the door. Naruto sighed as he had to wait for Kakashi to arrive. Remind me to do something about his tardy problem. He thought to no one in particular, but Akane responded anyway, will do, Naruto-kun. Though, I don't see why you didn't threaten those disgusting Icha books of his, maybe that could straighten him out. She suggested, as she really thought that those books were degrading to women everywhere. Naruto's head collided with the top of the table he was setting at, drawing the attention of his two teammates to him. What's with you, Baka? Sakura asked, annoyed at not only having to wait for their sensei but now for Naruto's antics. She got no reply as Naruto was berating himself. I'm such an idiot for not thinking about that last time. Akane was laughing at him for his stupidity. Just as he was about to reply, the door opened and in popped a head that was mostly covered with a mask and headband with spiked gray hair and a lazy look in the one visible eye. Kakashi just looked at the genin that were his team. My first impression of you all is, I hate you. Now meet me on the roof in 5 minutes, he said before he disappeared in a whirl of leaves and a poof of smoke. Naruto turned to the others. I like him already, he said with a small smile before disappearing in poof of smoke, signaling that he was a shadow clone. When Kakashi got to the roof, he was surprised to see that his blonde genin was already there, laying on his back staring at the sky. Well, this is a surprise. I didn't expect a genin to this fast, he said, drawing a smirk from the blonde. I was already here, Kakashi-sensei. The one you saw was just a shadow clone, he said to the Jonin, who nodded in understanding. This is unexpected. From the academy reports I thought that he would be a hyperactive, loud-mouthed brat, but this is the complete opposite of what I was led to believe about this one's behavior. And he seems to have discovered the secret of the shadow clone as well. He thought in mild surprise at finding a completely different Naruto than what the academy reports said that he would find. This Naruto was calm, cool, and collected. A big difference than the hyperactive, loud mouth stated in the reports. His thoughts were cut off when the door to the roof opened to show the other two on his team, who looked surprised to see the two already there. Kakashi waited for them to sight on either side of their teammate before speaking. now we can introduce ourselves. Introduce ourselves? Sakura asked, causing a sweat drop to go around the group. And she was said to be the smartest girl in the academy, they all thought? Yes, you know your likes, dislikes, and dreams for the future. He said, maybe you could go first to show yous what you mean. She said to him, making everyone's sweat drop again. Alright then. My name is Kakashi Hitaki. My likes, my dislikes, well, I have a lot of hobbies. My dream for the future, never really thought about it. He said, causing two of the genin to look at him questionably, and the third to just smile slightly in remembrance. Alright, you can go next, Pinky. Kakashi said, pointing to Sakura, whose eyebrow twitched slightly at the nickname. She calmed down to do her introduction. My name is Sakura Haruno. My likes, she looks at Sasuke and giggles. My dreams for the future. She again looks to Sasuke, giggling again and blushes. And your dislikes? Kakashi asked, fearing for the worst. Ino Pig and Naruto Baka. She screeched, causing everyone to cover their now ringing ears. Just I thought a fangirl. He thought with a shiver. Cutting his thoughts before they brought up bad memories, he pointed to Sasuke. Okay, Duck Butt's turn. He said, causing Naruto to snicker, Sasuke's eyebrows to twitch and Sakura to glare at him for insulting her crush. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I have few likes and many dislikes, and my goal is to kill a certain man. Sasuke said in his flat tone, causing Naruto and Kakashi to sweat drop, and Sakura to think, he's so cool. I think I just lost 10 years off my life writing that. Just as I thought, a brooder who is probably arrogant, thinks of nothing but himself, and is too stuck on revenge to do anything else. Kakashi thought to himself with a sigh. And last, but not least, Blondie. He said, pointing to Naruto, who sighed before starting his introduction. My name's Naruto Uzumaki, my likes are ramen, training, my friends, and two certain people. He started, and heard Akane giggling to herself at the reference to Tenten and her. My dislikes are arrogant people, hypocrites, rapists, those who would harm those precious to me, and a certain book series. He said, glaring at Kakashi, who shivered and thought, I hope that he doesn't mean what I think he means. Hot spring country. And at a hot spring a certain pervert felt the same shiver go down his spine. Someone means to do my babies harm, I must stop them, but first I must finish my research. He thought before turning back to said research, i.e. peeping on women. Back with Naruto. Back at the academy roof, Naruto was just about to finish his introduction when he felt a tingle in the back of his mind. I hope Ero Sennin isn't doing what I think he's doing, he thought before starting on his dream. And my dreams for the future are to start a family with the women I love, to make my parents proud of me, and before you ask Kakashi, yes, I know who they are. He said, jerking his head to the Hokage monument, more specifically the fourth's head, making Kakashi's eye widen before he continued. And to become Hokage, not because the people will respect me, but so I can protect the village and everyone in it, because to be Hokage it means that one must not only be prepared to protect, he must be prepared to lay down his life for not only the village and civilians, but for his soldiers as well. He finished with a determined fire in his eyes. His semi-speech had a few reactions, Sasuke's being eyes widening and thinking, maybe he isn't such a doby after all. Sakura's being nothing more than a simple humph, and Kakashi's eye widening even further. Not only does he know who his parents are, he defiantly knows what it means to be Hokage. He thought, really surprised now. Pulling himself together, he spoke to his team. Now that that's over, meet me tomorrow at Training Field 7 at 5 o'clock for your genin test. He said, surprising the two who didn't know what he meant. But Kakashi-sensei, we already had our genin tests. Sakura said in surprise. Actually, those were to see if you had what it takes to make the rank. He said, further surprising them. He turned to leave but stopped at the edge of the roof before turning back to them. Oh, don't eat anything or you'll puke. Ya nay. He said, disappearing in a cloud of smoke. Naruto sighed before getting up and turning towards his teammates. If I were you, I would eat a small breakfast and show up at 7 instead of 5, because if today was anything to go by, he'll probably be late by 2 hours again. He said, walking to the edge of the roof and jumping to the ground, and walked off. Training ground 45. 10 minutes later. Tenten sighed as she leaned against a tree at the training ground. Where is he? He said that right after he got done with his team meeting that he would be here. I wonder what the surprise is though. She thought with a bit of anticipation at the end. When she had met Naruto for lunch that afternoon, he had said that both he and Akane had a surprise for her, and she had been wondering what it was all day since then. She sighed again, this time in relief, when she saw Naruto land in front of her. Finally, I've been waiting for 10 minutes. She said, annoyed. Sorry, Ten-chan. Kakashi was later than I expected. Naruto said sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head. Alright, but what's this surprise you said that you had for me? She asked, a little excited. Naruto nodded, bit his thumb hard enough to draw blood, and began going through a set of hand signs, the last looking strange to her. When he was done, he slammed his hand down on the ground and yelled, summoning jutsu. There was a poof of smoke, and when it cleared, it showed Akane standing in front of them. Looking around, she had a confused look on her face until she saw Naruto standing beside a surprised-looking Tenten. How'd I get out of the seal? She asked shakily. Akane-chan, you had me sign the Fox contract, right? Naruto asked with a smirk. Yeah, she said, confused. And you're the boss of said contract, aren't you? Again she nodded. Yes, but I don't know how that. Oh, now I get it. You're saying that since I'm the boss of the Fox clan, you can summon me when you want, thus bypassing the seal. She said with a look of realization that slowly turned into a wide grin before it turned into a small frown. But do you realize how dangerous that could have been? What if the seal failed when I was summoned? She asked, looking at Naruto worriedly, like he was gonna drop dead any minute. Akane-chan, there's no chance of that happening because with the seal still working, you and your chakra goes back there when you cancel it out. So there's no risk of the seal failing when I let you out, because even with you out of it, there's still some of your chakra left in it. Right now I'd say that you have about 7 taels of your power, as that's all I meant to summon, so there's at least 2 taels worth of your chakra still in the seal keeping me alive. I can still summon those when we need it, but for now I'm just happy that you can come out for a bit. But I think that we came here to give Tenten her surprise, didn't we? He explained, asked, still smirking to the surprised as hell Akane and Tenten. Alright, Akane said, trying to get over the shock of the amount of thought that Naruto put into this. Turning to Tenten, who by now had gotten over her shock, and said, Tenten, I would like you to become the second summoner of the Fox summoning clan. Now that really surprised Tenten. She thought that Naruto showing her that Akane could come out of the seal was the surprise, but now they're asking her to sign a contract. Huh? Was all that she could get out of her mouth. Chuckling lightly, Naruto walked forward and said, Tenten, Akane-chan, and I would like you to become a summoner of the Fox clan. Tenten snapped out of her shock and said, I get that part, but why me? Naruto thought for a moment before replying, because it's a way that we can keep track of each other when we're on missions. I'm not pushing you to sign it, but knowing that you did would mean a lot to me, because I would know you're safe. He said honestly. What would be the benefits? Tenten asked curiously. Akane took over from there. Aside from what Naruto just told you, there would be a personal summons, who should be the first you do summon, which would be like what Gamakichi and Gamatatsu were to Naruto. Basically your combination attacks and your messengers. Then there's the boss summons, that being me, will help you if you need them for battles. The reason I offered this to Naruto was so that he could use Sage Mode again, seeing as we have the same thing, minus some differences, and once you turn 16 again we'll offer you Sage training since Naruto doesn't need to, having gone through it once already. Tenten looked to be thinking it over before she decided her answer, alright, I'll sign it. And so she did, though she asked why it was a different set of hand signs when they explained them, and she got the same answer Naruto did. Let's try this out now, she said, biting her thumb to draw blood. After going through the hand signs, she slammed her hand on the ground and yelled out, summoning jutsu. There was a poof of smoke and they saw a small black fox with brown eyes, and 2 bushy white-tipped tails. The fox looked around in confusion before its eyes landed on Akane, and it bowed to her and said in a feminine voice, Kyuubi-sama, what is the service you ask of me? Naruto and Tenten raised a brow at that while Akane's sweat dropped. It wasn't me who summoned you, Akira, it was one of our new summoners. Akane said to the now named Akira. I see, was all she said before turning to the others too. Which of you two was it who summoned me? Akira asked curiously. Tenten raised her hand a little shakily. I did, she said. Akira looked her over before asking, why is it you summoned me? A couple of reasons actually. The first was to see if I actually could summon, and the second was to get my personal summons, and if I heard right from Akane-chan would be the first fox I summoned, which would be you, I guess. Tenten explained a little sheepish at the end, causing Akira's eyes to widen, and she turned to Akane, who gave an affirmative nod. At Akane's nod of confirmation, Akira yipped in joy, bounded up Tenten's shoulder and started licking her cheek. Her actions caused Tenten to giggle slightly because it tickled, and Naruto and Akane to sweat drop. "Oh okay, what's that about?" Naruto asked Akane, who giggled at Akira's affection towards Tenten. Akira-chan has always wanted a summoner, and now that she has one I guess that she can't control herself. She said, "How do you know Akira then, Akane-chan?" Naruto asked. He was wondering about the relation between the two. Akane took her eye off of the duo to answer, "Akira's my little sister." She said sheepishly. "Huh?" Naruto asked. "Well, not by blood, but we're close enough to be sisters." Akane said, then she saw Naruto's confused look. "Remember Naruto-kun, I don't have any blood relatives other than the other tailed beasts, because we were once part of another beast." "Oh okay. But do each of the tailed beasts have genders or is it just you?" Naruto asked, really curious now. "Every tailed beast is female," Akane said, smirking. Naruto's eyes widened to comical proportions and his jaw dropped. He couldn't believe it, every one of the tailed beasts, the most powerful beings on the planet, were female? Well, I guess that would explain the destruction that they can cause. He thought with a shiver. "Akane-chan?" he asked. "Yes," she said, seeing his scared look. She smirked to herself. "Remind me to never piss you or any of your siblings off." "Will do, Naru-kun, will do," Akane replied in a smug little voice. She turned to the other two in the group and called out, "Hey Akira-chan, stop molesting Tenten-chan's face so we can finish talking." Akira stopped to glare at Akane and Tenten blushed as she walked over to them. "Now I do believe that we are here to test out the Sage Mode, aren't we?" Akane asked, getting affirmative nods from Naruto and Tenten, and a confused look from Akira before she stuttered out, "Sage Mode aka Nichan? But how could he have the Sage Mode? He hasn't had the training for it, and the only others to have Sage Mode were the Toads," she said, trailing off in realization. Everyone just smirked before Naruto said, "That's right, I've had Sage training from the Toads. Even though I don't have the contract yet, I can still feel the energy of the earth, and Akane-chan just so happened to tell me about the foxes had the same thing, and she let both me and Tenten sign the contract." Akane cut in here, "I'll explain how he got the training later, but for now let's see the Sage Mode," she said before turning to Naruto, who sat down in the lotus position. "Alright, I wanted to see if I can use the Rasen Shuriken as effectively as I had been able to anyway," he said, closing his eyes, clearing his mind of all things, and began to reach out and call upon the energy of the surrounding earth. "Rasen Shuriken?" Akira asked. The other two females just smirked and said that she would see. Naruto immediately felt the nature chakra react to his call, and it came to him and into his chakra network. As he balanced it out, he felt a little different than the toad version. He felt his canines lengthening, his hair getting wilder, and he bet that if he could look at himself from the side, then he would see his whisker marks becoming darker. He opened his eyes to see both Akane and Tenten looking at him like a fish out of water. Tenten's, Akira's and Akane's point of view. When Naruto had stopped talking to meditate, the changes had been almost instantaneous. He gained a dark red pigment around his eyes, his hair became wilder, and his whiskers became darker. When he opened his eyes, they saw that they had changed from a cerulean blue to a blood red with slits for pupils. Something like his initial Jinchuriki state. They just stared each in their own thoughts. "That's what I would look like with the Sage Mode. Cool. Naruto-kun looks so feral right now. I wonder if..." "No bad ten, you must not think pervy thoughts," were Tenten's thought that had suddenly turned from admiring to perverted, then to scolding. "Wow, that looks so cool. I wish I had Sage training too," Akira thought, pouting before she caught a whiff of a strange smell that seemed to be coming from both Akane and Tenten. She had smelt that smell before. It was when some of the other foxes were in heat. Her eyes widened in realization yet again. "No way. Aka Nichan has chosen a mate? And if my nose isn't wrong, and it never is, Tenten has chosen him as hers too," she thought with a small smirk. "So that's what it looks like. I've never seen the Sage Mode of my clan, but I knew it was powerful, but by the feel of Naruto's chakra levels, that just skyrocketed, I didn't expect it to be this powerful." With the Toad's version, his reserves did the same, but if he were to combine those two together, then there's no telling to how powerful he could become. "I have defiantly picked a worthy mate." Akane's thoughts trailed off to the M-rated area as she began to get a little hot under the collar. "Normal point of view. What?" Naruto asked, his voice sounding a little deeper. Three shocked and two slightly turned on women snapped out of their scolding, realizing perverted thoughts to see Naruto looking at them with a raised eyebrow. Blushing and looking sheepish, they nodded in approval. It looks good, Naruto-kun, though I can see what you mean by differences. Tenten said to Akane, who nodded. I thought that there would be differences, but I mostly meant with the pupils and the eye and pigment coloring, not growing more feral to go with. She said. This perked Naruto's interest. What do you mean by that, Akane-chan? He asked. Well, like I explained to you before. I had said that there would be a change in the pigment and eye colors to match that of a fox's, right? She got a nod from him. The thing is that I've never seen my clan's version of sage mode being used by humans before. Only by the sages of the clan. I didn't expect you to become feral looking. People could mistake you for using my chakra if you were letting out killing intent. She explained. What do you mean by using your chakra, aka Nichan? Akira asked, confused. Akane looked a little surprised at the question. You know I've been sealed for the last 13 years, right? She asked her sister. Akira nodded. Well, meet my Jinchuriki. She said, pointing to Naruto, who waved. So you're the one that she got sealed into. Just let me tell you this though. Her face started to take on a threatening look with her eyes narrowing into a glare, and she bared her teeth. If you hurt my sister, I will hunt you down and make you wish you were never born a man. She said before her look turned into a smile. But if you don't, everything will be alright between us. She said, causing Naruto to shiver and nod his head fast in fear. Even fox females are scary. He thought. Now let's try out the Rasen Shuriken. He said with a maniacal grin that was mirrored by the other two and one that was sweat dropping at the looks of the others. To have that look, this has got to be a good jutsu. Akira thought at seeing the looks of her sister, Tenten and Naruto. Tenten had the look because she liked anything that was shaped like a weapon and caused mass destruction, and Akane because she liked things that caused mass destruction and anything that went boom. Who said that girls didn't like things like that? Forming his favorite hand sign and forming two clones, he held his hand out with one positioning its hands facing his and the other starting to jab at them. It went on for a few seconds before they started to see the Rasengan form. Then it started to glow a ghostly white, growing 4 blades. It took the shape of a small shuriken, then started to grow larger, while a screeching sound almost like a bell could be heard getting louder as the Rasen Shuriken took shape. Such chakra. To be able to have wind manipulation of this level. Even our best wind users can't do this kind of thing. Just who is this guy? Akira thought in amazement as she gazed at the jutsu. Everyone stared at it in remembrance and in one case shock for a minute before Naruto brought his hand up and aimed for the sky, shouting, "Wind style! Rasenshuriken!" He threw it. He waited for it to get a good distance into the air before snapping his fingers. The effect was instantaneous as the Rasen Shuriken expanded, becoming 1/4 of a mile in diameter. When it finished growing, it became a huge sphere of pure wind and chakra. The screeching sound was now way louder than before. The Hokage Tower. What the fuck is that? The old Hokage shouted as he looked out of his window to a distant training field. The day had started normally enough, but then this had happened. He had been taking a break from his paperwork and had been looking out of the window when he saw a giant shuriken fly into the sky. Then it had suddenly expanded and turned into the dome that he and probably everyone in the village could now see and hear if the slight sound of a bell that could be heard was to go by. "Anbu," he called for the Black Ops team. "Yes, Hokage-sama." The one wearing the cat mask stated as they appeared, saluting their aged leader. "Go and investigate whatever or whoever is causing that. Here is an order," pointing to the visible dome of wind in the distance. "Yes, sir," they all said at once and left in the body flicker technique. As he looked on at the now dispersing dome, he couldn't help but think, whatever jutsu that is, it's surely S-ranked. I hope to hell whoever the wielder is that he's on our side. Back with Naruto and the girls. That was awesome. They all shouted as they looked at the damage to the training field. After the S-ranked jutsu had dispersed, the training ground was a complete mess. There were trees ripped up and thrown everywhere, and there was a crater where the dome of wind and chakra had touched the ground. I feel like I can pull a 5 more before I run out of sage chakra. That will defiantly come in handy. Naruto thought, impressed, as before he could only fire off about 2 Rasen Shurikens before he lost sage mode, but now it felt as if he had gathered enough nature chakra for 6 of the things. Must be the increased chakra reserves. He decided. I love this jutsu so much, destruction. Wonder what would happen if he made another elemental variant to the Rasengan. Akane thoughts as she wondered at all the possibilities that elemental variants to the Rasengan. The damage caused by this is impossible to match with any other jutsu except for the tailed beast bomb. Still, even if it's been a while since I've saw it, the damage it causes still amazes me, were Tenten's thoughts as she looked on in awe. Such a jutsu. To even be able to use it must have taken months if not years of training. I understand why Oni-chan chose him for her mate, Akira thought as she gazed in shocked amazement. Naruto suddenly realized something. Girls? He asked nervously. Yeah? They turned to him as they heard the nervousness in his voice. I think that the whole village was able to see that. He said, still nervous, causing the girls' eyes to widen in realization, so I think that we should run. He shouted the last part as they took off at high speed. They didn't stop running until they were 2 miles away from the field. The next morning, Naruto sighed as he walked onto Training Ground 7. It seemed that his and the girls' escapade yesterday had stirred quite the fuss. Every ninja he saw afterwards was heading towards the area. They had been lucky to get out of the area when they did, as 10 seconds later it would have been too late to escape. The girls had left him and Akane to go home a couple hours after, and Akane had gone back to the mindscape after getting used to being outside again. He sighed again as he looked up to see Sasuke and Sakura sitting against a tree in the middle of the field. As soon as she had spotted him, Sakura jumped up and shouted, "Naruto Baka, you're late," and tried to punch him. And just like yesterday he dodged it, grabbed her arm, and pinned it behind her back. "What did I tell you about that?" Naruto asked rhetorically, "And as for me being late, Sensei isn't here at the moment, so as long as I'm here before Sensei is, then I'm not late. Am I Kakashi-sensei?" He finished calling out to over by the trees. Kakashi, who had been observing his genin interacting with each other, was surprised when he had been called out. Snuffing out his surprise for now, he walked calmly out of the trees and over to his team. "Naruto's right, Sakura. But I've got to ask, how is it that you knew I was there, Naruto?" he asked as he stopped in front of them. Naruto simply smirked and replied, "A good ninja never tells his secrets." Kakashi nodded his head, accepting the answer, for now. "Very well, your test is 2. He reached into his hip pouch and brought out 2 bells. "Get these bells from me. None of you will be able to pass without one," he said. Sensei, there's only 2 bells and there's 3 of us," Sakura pointed out. "Yes, then it seems that only 2 of you will pass then," Kakashi said, surprising the 2 who didn't know. "Now you must come at me with the intent to kill or you won't get them, understand?" he asked. He got a nod from everyone. "Good, then let the test begin," he said. With that, all 3 disappeared into the surrounding forest. Kakashi sighed as he stood in the middle of the training field just after he started the test. Well, at least 2 of them are good at hiding, he thought. He could tell where Sasuke and Sakura were hiding. Sasuke being on a tree just at the beginning of the forest, and Sakura was in a bush to his left. What do they teach in the academy these days? How to get killed? He questioned. He could clearly see Sakura's pink hair. I wonder where the other one is though, Kakashi thought. He couldn't even sense Naruto's chakra. Naruto meanwhile was sitting in a tree a good distance away, thinking about how he could possibly get his teammates to work with him. He had considered just letting them fail, but knew that in order for him to correct the timeline he would have to make sure that the team actually became a team. That meant that he would have to get his friends back and if possible save Sasuke from Orochimaru. He just had to think of how to get them to work with him at the moment. He sighed as he decided to just go with a repeat of something from the last time, though it won't be me getting the 1,000 years of death this time, he thought with an evil smirk. Kakashi was a little surprised when he saw Naruto walk calmly out of the trees. Stopping just a few feet away from his sensei, Naruto just stared at him and he stared right back. Naruto sighed again as he decided to break the ice. I know this test is about teamwork, Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi's eye widened at Naruto's statement. He knew what the test was about? So you figured it out, he stated. Yep, and I know more than you think, like how your teammate Obito Uchiha gave you that Sharingan you hide behind your headband, Naruto said with a smirk. Kakashi was surprised even more than he had been the day before. First Naruto knew who his father was, now he knew his teammates were. Just who was this kid? How do you know all this? He stuttered. Well, as to how I know about my parents, I've met them. Well, Dad at least, Naruto said, surprising Kakashi more. And as to the Obito thing, Do you honestly think that after finding out about my parents that I wouldn't research everything I could about them? He asked, deciding to start the impending fight by charging in, aiming a punch for Kakashi's face. How could you have met them? The last I checked, Minato-sensei and Kushina died in the Kyuubi's attack the night you were born. Kakashi said, dodging the fist and retaliating with a kick to Naruto's side that connected and sent him skidding a meter away. Coming to a halt, Naruto created 4 clones that charged Kakashi with raised fists while he stayed back doing hand signs. Kakashi dodged a punch from the left, and kicked the clone in the stomach, causing it to dispel. He jumped above a sweeping kick from the behind, and threw a kunai behind him as he landed, dispelling the clone behind him, before punching an incoming clone, dispelling it. Seeing another clone coming from the front with a fist raised, he jumped back and dispelled it with a punch to the temple. Turning around, he saw that the last clone had a shuriken in its hand and was ready to throw it. Rushing in, Kakashi dispelled it with a punch to the side of the face. He was about to turn back to the original before he heard a voice calling out a jutsu from behind him, wind style, great breakthrough. A giant blast of wind came surging forward. No way could a genin do elemental jutsu. It takes too much chakra. Kakashi thought in surprised as he was thrown towards a tree on the side of the field. When he hit, he went up in smoke, and in his place was a smashed log. A substitution. Naruto thought in alarm before checking around him. If he's not to sides and not above me, then that means he's, were his thoughts before a hand caught his foot. Below, shouted a muffled voice from under the ground before he was dragged downwards. When the dust cleared, it showed Kakashi standing over Naruto, who was neck deep in the dirt, literally. Earth style. Headhunter jutsu. Kakashi said before turning his attention to Naruto. Now would you mind answering my question? Kakashi asked. Naruto smirked. Sorry sensei, but I'm not the real one, he said. Kakashi's eye widened before the clone dispersed. His only thoughts were, how could a shadow clone make more clones? With the real Naruto. The real Naruto had been trying to find Sasuke and Sakura, and had just found Sasuke when the clone he had fighting Kakashi dispelled. Holding his head at the income of the memories, he muttered, stupid clone, revealed too much. He looked up to see that Sasuke had been watching the fight between the clone and Kakashi with wide eyes. Thankfully, he'd been too far away to hear what the fighters had said. Naruto just walked up and whispered, hey Sasuke. Said person jumped slightly and turned to him. Sasuke looked at Naruto with a glare. What do you want, Dobi? Naruto sighed. This is going to be difficult. He thought before speaking out loud. I thought that maybe we could set aside our differences and work together. Sasuke just stared before turning to walk away. You've got to be joking. As if I'd work with you, he said arrogantly. Naruto sighed in annoyance and jumped in front of Sasuke, blocking his way, and said angrily, will you just listen to what other people are saying for once in your life? Sasuke just stared blankly at him before he said, fine. What is it you had in mind? Naruto smirked. Good. Now before I tell you my plan, we have to find Sakura. He said, why would we need her to pass this? Sasuke asked with a raised eyebrow. Naruto just asked, have you ever heard of a 2-man genin cell before? Sasuke shook his head in the negative. Exactly, they've all I've ever seen are the 3 genin and the Jonin sensei. So this test has to be a setup. You know, make us fight each other over the bells thing. Naruto explained, smirking at Sasuke's face, which had become more and more surprised as he spoke. Thinking it over, Sasuke realized that what Naruto said was true. He almost slapped himself for not figuring it out before now. Fine, let's find Sakura. He said in depression. I knew you'd see it my way. Naruto said with a grin. Finding Sakura had been easy after Kakashi had done his lesson on genjutsu. We all know what was in the genjutsu, it was the same as canon. It had been convincing her to work with, then that was the problem. She had been all for helping Sasuke, just not Naruto. Though in the end they did get her to agree with them. After explaining his plan, Naruto set out to be the main distraction. With Kakashi. After Naruto's clone had dispelled, Kakashi had been thinking over on how he could have possibly known everything that he did. Like how he knew who his parents were, or how Naruto knew he had the Sharingan. Kakashi knew that Obito being his teammate was common knowledge to anyone who researched the Yondaime's students. What he didn't know, however, was how Naruto knew about his parents. The Hokage had kept his heritage secret to protect him, damn it. He also knew the Hokage had planned to reveal his heritage when he reached Chunin, and tell the village when he reached Jonin. But what was really bothering him was the fact that not only had Naruto known about them but claimed to have met his father. Something that should have been impossible. How could he have met them? The last I checked, Sensei and Kushina-san were dead. He thought, trying to wrap his head over it all. He was snapped out of his thoughts when he heard the sound of a kunai cutting through the air. He tilted his head to the left so it would fly past him. "So you're trying again," Kakashi said, turning to Naruto, who was standing a few meters away. "Well, if at first you don't succeed, then try again, is the saying, isn't it?" Naruto asked, getting into a fighting stance. "True, but you still haven't answered my question," Kakashi said, getting into his own stance. Sighing to himself, Naruto thought of how to explain it and finally thought of a variation of the truth. It was the night of the scroll incident. Naruto said, surprising Kakashi slightly, "When I had gotten home I was feeling depressed at finally knowing why I was hated. You should know what my life has been like, seeing as you were one of the Anbu that was protecting me most of the time," he said, causing Kakashi to lower his gaze. What Naruto was saying was true. He had been beaten numerous times, and the only reason Kakashi and his other protectors hadn't been able to stop them was that they had been out on missions only they could do. "Yeah, I know. But for what it's worth, sorry for not being able to stop some of the beatings," Kakashi said in a depressed tone. "The ones that got through were during the times when I and the others that don't hate you were out on missions," he explained, causing Naruto to smile slightly. "Yeah, I figured as much," Naruto said. "But back the story," he said, causing Kakashi to perk his head up eagerly. "I was so full of hatred that I went into the seal." Kakashi's eyes widened. "I met the Kyuubi, and it, sorry Akane-chan, tempted me into removing the seal." Kakashi's eyes widened even further. "I almost did, but Dad stopped me," he said in remembrance. Kakashi's eyes now held confusion instead of surprise. What do you mean he stopped you?" he asked in a disbelieving voice. "Yeah, it surprised me too when I saw him," Naruto said with a smirk. "But it turns out Dad had left the last of his and Mom's chakra in the seal in case it was ever close to breaking," he said, causing Kakashi to almost faint from shock. "He told me who my mother was and the condition of how I'll meet her, but the most important thing that he told me was that he believes in me," Naruto said. One of the happiest grins Kakashi had ever seen adorned his face. Kakashi, while surprised, found himself chuckling. That is indeed what his sensei would do. "So what was the condition for you to meet your mother?" Kakashi asked. "When I go to fight Kyuubi for its chakra." While he had been expecting many things, this was not one of them. "Huh?" was all that came out of a shocked Kakashi's mouth. "You heard me, sensei," Naruto said. How can he expect you to fight the Kyuubi?" Kakashi asked. "Honestly, I don't know, but I'll burn that bridge when I come to it," Naruto said, as if it didn't matter. Which in truth it didn't, because with Akane now out of the genjutsu, using her chakra was so much easier than it was before. Now that that's over with, Naruto sighed before cupping his hands around his mouth. He shouted, "Now guys." As he shouted, Kakashi realized that for the most part Naruto had used this as a distraction. When Naruto had given the signal, the area was immediately showered with kunai and shuriken. Kakashi dodged most and deflected the rest. "Fire style. Fireball jutsu," he heard Sasuke shout as he felt a heat on his back. He turned and saw a huge fireball bearing down on him. "Oh come on, two genin that can use elemental jutsu," he thought as he barely dodged it. "Wind style. Great breakthrough," Naruto shouted from the opposite side of the fireball, letting loose a blast of wind that caused the fireball to not only grow but change directions, as he had put more chakra into his jutsu than Sasuke had his. This is why they don't teach this stuff in the academy, Kakashi thought, inwardly crying anime tears as he substituted with a log, only to have to jump back from a volley of shuriken from Sakura, who had been waiting in the tree line. But when he had jumped back, he found himself stepping on a thin line of ninja wire, causing yet another wave of kunai to come from the trees. Where'd they get all the kunai? He wondered. He dodged to the right and immediately felt his legs being held down by something. Looking down, he saw that he was held down by a pair of hands coming out of the ground. That moment of distraction was all Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura needed to rush in and tie him down with ninja wire. When he had been tied down, the hands that had been holding him dispelled in a poof of smoke. That little copycat, Kakashi thought with a sweat drop when he saw his own jutsu being used against him. Seeing that their sensei couldn't move, Sakura walked up to him and pulled the bells from where they had been tied to his belt. Well, it seems that you passed, Sakura. Now who are you going to give the other bell to? Kakashi asked. Looking between her to teammates, Sakura's inner personality was yelling at her to give it to Sasuke so they could be on the team alone, and to send Naruto back to the academy. She sighed before throwing the bells down and said, as much as I hate the prospect of being on a team with Naruto Baka, I say that it's either we all pass or none of us pass. Sakura's answer surprised Kakashi slightly, but he looked past her to see Naruto and Sasuke nodding signally that they agreed. Is that your final answer? He asked in a dark voice as thunderclouds gathered. All three nodded defiantly to say that they were sticking to their answer. Very well then, you all pass, he said as the clouds went away. Naruto merely smirked as the other two were shocked. Huh? Was all that would come from their mouths? Cue Kakashi's speech from canon. I'm just too lazy and tired to type it. Now meet up here at 9 so we can start our training and missions. Kakashi said. Though, Naruto, I would like to talk to you for a moment. Kakashi said to two of his students' surprise, before they walked off. They waited for a minute for them to walk a far enough distance so that they couldn't be heard. Okay, Kakashi-sensei, what is it that you needed me for? Naruto asked, though he had a feeling as to why. Kakashi sighed and asked, did you use all that for a distraction or were you telling the truth? Naruto's smirk could be seen from space. It was both. Though I don't even know why I told you to begin with, he said, and honestly it was the truth. He didn't know why he did. Kakashi just looked at him for a moment before shaking his head. Thank you for telling me this. It means a lot to know that a part of Minato-sensei was able to meet and talk to his son, if only for a bit. He said, truly happy. However, I have to ask, how is it that your clones were able to make clones? He asked. Normally clones didn't have enough chakra to do a high-powered jutsu. Naruto's had not only done a C-ranked wind jutsu, but made even more clones. That just wasn't possible. Naruto just smirked. You know I have more chakra than just about anybody in this village, don't you? Kakashi nodded. The chakra level 1 have is probably more than the old man's at this point. But since the chakra is split evenly, if I don't make more than 3 clones, they themselves can make clones. Though the memories of those go to the clones that made them. He said a bit sheepishly at the end. Kakashi's eyes were almost popping out of his head by the end of Naruto's explanation. Snapping out of his shock, he heard Naruto ask something he wasn't expecting. Sensei, if I could ask you to keep the fact that I know about my parents a secret from the old man, could you? Naruto asked nervously. Kakashi thought it over a bit before he sighed again. I could do that. But how much do you know about your father? Do you know about his jutsus? He asked. Naruto thought about how much he should let Kakashi know. Deciding that a little more information couldn't hurt, he replied. Pretty much everything that was in the history books, and yes, I know and am able to preform the Rasengan. He said, causing Kakashi's eyes to widen in disbelief. Show me, he said, a little unsure. Alright, Naruto said, holding his hand out, and formed a swirling sphere of chakra. Thankfully yesterday he and Tenten had been able to get their control up to the point that they had a pretty good level control over their massive reserves. Kakashi's eyes were even wider than they had been before, if that were possible. Wha? How is it that you're able to use that jutsu? He asked in a stutter. Do you really think that after find out the secret to the shadow clone that I wouldn't have looked up my father's jutsus and then use it to master them? Naruto asked with a smirk. When did you master it? Kakashi asked. I started working on it the day before yesterday. But I got it down yesterday, Naruto lied. Hey, he had to come up with something. Naruto's answer amazed Kakashi to no end. A genin, a fucking genin, had mastered one of the hardest A-ranked jutsus in 2 days. This kid is a genius to be able to get it down in that time frame. Kakashi thought in amazement. Sighing, again, to himself he nodded. Okay, I can keep this a secret, but could you do one thing for me? He asked. What's that? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. Untie me, he said, causing Naruto to sweat drop. Yeah, I can do that, Naruto said, cutting his sensei loose, and with that they parted ways. In the Hokage Tower we find several of the Leaf Village's most prominent jonin standing before their aged leader. Among them was a woman that many men would kill just to look at, and many more women would kill to have her looks. She had dark hair, red eyes, and wore what could be described as bandages, with her left sleeve being red. She was Kurenai Yuhi, Konoha's Genjutsu mistress, and Ice Queen of Konoha. Another was a man with brown eyes and short black spiky hair. He had a V-shaped beard with a cigarette in his mouth. He wore a green Konoha flak jacket with black pants and black shinobi sandals. He also had a sash with the kanji for fire on it. The man was known as Asuma Sarutobi, son of the third Hokage. They, along with all the other Jonin, had one thing in common. They had all taken a team this year. Now they were waiting for one chronically late Kakashi Hatake. Well, we might as well begin seeing as Kakashi won't be here for at least another hour, the old Cage said. So tell me who has passed and who has failed, he asked. The Jonins started to list off the teams. Team 1 fail, Team 2 fail, Team 3 fail, Team 4 fail, Team 5 fail, Team 6 fail. Kurenai was about to step up to state whether or not her team had passed or failed when there was a poof sound with the swirl of leaves and a plume of smoke that signaled a Shunshin, and Kakashi came into view. There was a silence for a moment that was broken when Kakashi looked up from his book and said, "Yo. Right on time, Kakashi, so tell us, did Team 7 pass or not?" Hiruzen asked, a small bead of sweat forming on the back of his head. Team 7, pass. Kakashi said, surprising many with his answer until a random Jonin spoke up. Well, that should have been obvious with Uchiha-sama on the team. He said, causing many to nod with him until Kakashi broke their bubble. Actually, it was Naruto that figured out the purpose of the bell test. And it seems he saw through my lies about not eating and showing up early. He stated with a bit of pride in his voice. Kakashi's statement left many stunned. Naruto Uzumaki, the dead last of the academy, the one who failed the graduation exams twice, figured out the purpose of the bell test. It didn't seem possible to many of the ones there. The Hokage, though surprised, was nevertheless proud of his surrogate grandson. Very well, what is your assessment of Team 7 then? He asked, curious of how they all had done. Taking a moment to gather his thoughts, Kakashi told everyone how his team had worked. Starting off with Naruto, at first I thought that he would be the loud-mouthed brat that couldn't even use a jutsu right. But during the test, he showed that he was able to use his shadow clones to the fullest and was capable of using a C-ranked wind jutsu. He said, surprising everyone there, that the Dobi of the academy has such skill. But I was greatly surprised that he not only figured out the true purpose of the test but convinced the others to work with him. Naruto has the ability to be a great team leader and is the strongest on my team and, quite possibly, his whole class. Everyone was surprised even more than they were before. The so-called Dobi of the academy not only figured out the real purpose of the test, but somehow managed to get his teammates, who were the least likely ones that would to work with him. He had the ability to lead, and, if what his sensei said was true, then he was the strongest not only in his team but possibly his class as well. The Hokage was extremely proud of Naruto, but despite how proud he was, he needed to know the strength of all his future soldiers, not just one of them. And the others? The Sarutobi inquired. Again, Kakashi gathered his thoughts for a moment before speaking. Sasuke ultimately is an extremely talented genin, but he needs to learn how to work well with others. Kakashi stated, making the Hokage raise his eyebrow. How so? He asked. Well, while he is capable of working with others, he at first refused to work with Naruto at all. He only did so when Naruto pointed out the hints that I left for them. He informed the aged leader. But once he actually works with Naruto, it's almost flawless. Kakashi said with a little pride in his voice at his two male genin. And Sakura? The Hokage asked. At this, Kakashi's attitude visibly deflated, his shoulders slumped and his head dropped a bit. The Hokage, seeing this, raised a brow. Something wrong, Kakashi? He asked. No, Hokage-sama, it's just that Sakura's performance. Kakashi trailed slightly at the end, trying to find the right words to say. Well, to put it nicely, it was disappointing. He said, surprising the others. Why is that? Her records from the academy said that she was ranked in the top of her class. The Hokage asked, said, somewhat confused as to why Sakura's performance would be less than satisfactory. Then someone should go and check what exactly they're teaching then, because out of all the three on my team she is the worst off. Kakashi said, crossing his arms. His blatant disapproval surprised many of the Jonin in the room, though many of them secretly agreed with him. The Hokage, however, just chuckled lightly. It was about time someone other than him questioned what the academy was teaching. I'll look into it later, but for now, please, tell me how Sakura performed. Hiruzen said. Very well, Hokage-sama. Kakashi said before he started his assessment on his female student. As I said before, her performance was disappointing. From the very beginning she was more worried for Sasuke than she was about herself passing the test. He said, making many of the Jonin there frown and have one thought, oh great a fangirl. I had sent a clone to observe them all before I had started fighting Naruto. It observed a Naruto clone convincing Sasuke, left after he had, and then it put Sakura in an E-rank genjutsu, which should have been easy enough for her to get out of, but instead she screamed and passed out, alerting Naruto and Sasuke, who had been searching for her, to her position. After they had roused her, she immediately tried hitting Naruto after he suggested working together, saying, and I quote, "Naruto baka, why would Sasuke-kun or I work with you?" After which, Sasuke pointed out what Naruto had to him earlier and she immediately agreed with him like a loyal puppy. Kakashi stated in slight disgust, which no one could blame him for. Fangirls were in many Jonin's opinion, a worthless batch. How they even made it in the academy in their day was a mystery to many of them, but they knew how they had made it in this day and age, and that was because of the civilian council taking control of the academy curriculum in the aftermath of the Kyuubi attack, thus making it easier for their children to become ninja. Sakura didn't play that much of a role in the end, but what she did do was mostly with kunai and shuriken. Kakashi said, finishing his team assessment. Very well then, now that Team 7's assessment is done, we'll move on to Team 8. The Hokage said as Kakashi stepped back and Kurenai moved forward. Team 8 passes, Kurenai said with a smile. She went on to explain how her team passed with almost flawless teamwork and tracking skills. All that she really noted that needed work was Kiba's and Hinata's attitudes. Kiba being too brash needed to be toned down a bit, and Hinata being too shy needed a confidence boost. As she stepped back, Asuma stepped forward. Team 10 passes, he said with a wide grin. He explained how his team passed with excellent teamwork from years of working together when their families got together, and how they used basic Ino Shikacho formations. Alright then, teams 7, 8, and 10 pass and teams 1-6 fail. Everyone is dismissed except for Kakashi. The age challenge cage said. Everyone minus Kakashi, who had a questioning look, left. What is it you need of me, Hokage-sama? Kakashi asked in a serious voice. The Hokage sighed before he spoke. I have a feeling that there's more to Naruto's skills than you told everyone, he said. Kakashi was a little surprised before he sighed. Yeah, he's a lot more skilled than I led everyone to believe, but he has asked me to keep most of what he revealed to me a secret from everyone. Though I must admit, he surprised even me with how much he knows and what he's capable of, Kakashi said with no small amount of pride in his voice. Now Hiruzen was surprised, but extremely proud at the same time. Surprised that Naruto wanted to keep secrets from him, and proud because he was becoming quite the ninja. But he understood that every ninja had to have his secrets. He chuckled at how well Naruto was coming along. Very well, but what can you tell me about his skills and how would you place him? He asked. Kakashi just smirked. I can't tell you anything about his skills, but what I can say is that you will be very surprised when you see him in the next Chunin exams, he said, surprising the Hokage at his admittance that he would be entering them into the exams. But overall, I would say that what he showed me was at least high Chunin, maybe low Jonin level, he said, further surprising the Sarutobi. This was a newly graduated genin they were talking about here, so how on earth could he be that strong so soon after graduation? If only they knew. Are you serious, Kakashi? Even if he's had years to train, he couldn't have gotten that strong, he stuttered in surprise. Kakashi just smirked again. What was the jutsu that he recently came across, Hokage-sama? Kakashi asked in an amused voice. The cage's eyes widened in realization. The shadow clone? He asked in amazement. Kakashi nodded. Exactly. My guess is that he was keeping a list of jutsu that he was studying for years, and since he recently got the jutsu and knew the benefits, he spent the day off that he had before team assignments to train in them all, Kakashi stated. Now the Hokage's eyes were wide open with how Naruto used the shadow clones as only he, as far as he knew, could. He chuckled again, nodding. Very well then, Kakashi, you may leave. But do inform me on how your team is doing, especially on how Naruto improves, he said. Kakashi nodded and snapped a salute to his leader before sunshining out of the office. With Naruto was waiting for Tenten on a training field that they had decided to use after the incident with the Rasen Shuriken. What were we thinking trying that? The training ground that we were using hasn't been empty since. And he was right, it hadn't. The Anbu had roped off the area and hadn't let anyone in. It wasn't my idea, Naruto-kun, it was yours. Akane said in an innocent voice, making Naruto sweat drop. Now that's not fair, Akane-chan, he whined. You were all for the idea before we had to run for it. He thought to her, and he could almost feel her pouting at him, causing a smirk to form on his face. I could withdraw the contract and let you fend for yourself until you get the Toad contract, you know. Akane said, trying to get to him, and it worked like a charm. When he had heard what Akane said, Naruto had somehow brought himself into the mindscape and was now kneeling in front of her. Please don't do that, Aka-chan. I'll do anything to keep the ability to summon. He said, and then thought of something. Besides, how am I going to be able to bring you out of the seal for our date tonight? He asked. Now that had her wide-eyed and blushing. A date? She asked. What, can I take you or Tenten out every now and then? He asked, trying to figure out why he didn't do this when the three of them first got together. The next thing he knew was that his lips were being assaulted by Akane's own. It was a bit of a surprise to him because when it came to this kind of activity, Akane was usually on the shy side. He opened his mouth when he felt her tongue asking for entrance and proceeded to battle with hers. He won, and though they had kissed before, it was never like this, and he was a bit surprised when he found that her mouth tasted like raspberry. Akane moaned when Naruto's tongue massaged hers. Akane was in heaven, she had never felt like this before. Oh Kami, if this is what kissing feels like, then I can't wait for when he's in his older body to get to the good stuff. Akane thought, moaning again. When the need for air became apparent to them, they pulled away from each other, panting a bit. I guess that you want to go out tonight? Naruto asked with a knowing smirk. Akane nodded in excitement. Oh yes, I would really enjoy being able to go on a date tonight, Naruto-kun. Akane said in an equally excited voice. Though summon me when you get out, Ten-chan is here. She said, sensing her fellow Naruto lover coming onto the training ground and pushing the blonde to the real world. When Naruto opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the smiling face of Tenten close to his. Hey Ten-chan, what's up? He asked, smiling at her. Not much, just that I've been waiting to do this since this morning. She said before closing the gap to claim his lips in a passionate kiss. Naruto's eyes once again widened in surprise before he smirked into it and began a battle for dominance. They only stopped because of the need to breath became too much. Pulling back just a bit, he smiled even more. How did I ever get this lucky? He muttered, mostly to himself, but Tenten still heard it. Don't know, you're just lucky, I guess. She said with a small grin of her own. Not that I don't mind the meet and greet, but I do believe that you have to ask her something, Naruto. Akane said in Naruto's head, making him nod to her as he stepped back from Tenten, bit his thumb and went through the hands, slammed his hand down, and in a puff of smoke Akane was standing before them with a smirk. Turning to Naruto, she smirked more. Don't you have something to ask her? Akane asked, making Tenten look at them with some confusion. Right, he said before walking up to Tenten and gently grasped her hands in his. Tenten, would you do me the honor of taking you and Akane-chan out to dinner tonight? He asked in a low tone. Tenten's face was as red as a tomato. Naruto-kun's asking me out? She thought in shock and embarrassment. Understandable, because this would be the first date she had ever gone on. She snapped out of her thoughts. She saw Naruto's face close to hers with a concerned look. You okay, Ten-chan? He asked, his concern seeping in his voice. Why, yeah, I'm fine. Tenten said, still blushing, and of course you can take me out to dinner. She said happily with a large grin. Good, then you'll pick us up here at 7 tonight then. Akane, who had been watching from the side, said, and grabbed Tenten's arm in hers and began dragging her away. Said panda-haired girl was too confused as to why she had grabbed her and was dragging her off to do anything about it. Hey, what about training? Naruto called after them. Yeah, don't we have to train? Tenten asked, coming out of her confusion. Not today, we don't, we have to get ready for our date tonight. I don't know about Tenten, but I could use a few more outfits than what I'm usually wearing. She said, referring to the blue kimono she had on. So we're going to spend this time shopping. She finished walking off the field, Tenten still held tightly in her grasp. Naruto just stared after them leaving until they were out of his sight. He sighed when he couldn't see them. Girls are weird, he said before heading out to get reservations, and to shop for his own clothes. With Akane and Tenten an hour later. It had taken a while to get to the nearest clothing store from the training ground they had been at. Was it really a good idea to just leave him without letting him know where we're going? Tenten asked, looking over some of the clothes in her size that the store had to offer. Akane, who was inside the changing room trying on something that she had found, smirked. I figured that we could let him do his own shopping and to get reservations somewhere, she said, and then she poked her head out from behind the curtain. Though I think that we should go over who else is going to be with Naru-kun. Tenten, who had looked up when Akane had spoken, said, yeah, I've been thinking about that too, and I've got an idea on who else there should be. Oh? Do tell, Akane said with a raised brow. Well, you know that Naruto-kun saved Gaia from her own tailed beast, right? She asked, making Akane nod. And from the look that I saw her give him when we revived her, she might like him romantically, though we'd have to find a way to save her from the one-tails again, Tenten said with a thoughtful look at the end. Akane looked thoughtful as well before her look turned into a grin. I think I might know who else would like him, provided that we can introduce them when he goes on that mission to Takigakure, Hidden Waterfall Village, she said, making Tenten look at her in confusion. Who would that be? The only person Naruto knows from that village is Shibuki. So who could you be meaning? She asked, confused, making Akane's grin widen. Gaia isn't the only female Jinchuriki, she said, making Tenten eyes widen. Taki happens to have one of their own, and it just so happens that said Jinchuriki is female. Akane finished, causing Tenten to realize what she meant. So you're saying that we should get Taki's Jinchuriki together with Naruto-kun? Tenten asked curiously. Akane nodded before her head went back into the room. Yeah, and if what I've heard from Shichibi is right, she's had a similar time to what Naruto-kun's had to being a Jinchuriki, she stated in a low voice in the end. Tenten's head dipped in sadness, remembering what Naruto's life had been like. If someone else's had been like that, then she could see why Akane would want to get her with him. Her head shot up in realization when she thought back to what Akane said. What do you mean by, what I've heard from Shichibi? She asked, confused. Her question made Akane blink for a moment before she realized what she meant. Oh, didn't I mention that we tailed beasts can communicate with each other? She said, popping her head out from behind the curtain again. She saw Tenten shake her head to the negative and she sighed. Yeah, I probably should have told you guys sooner. But since we were born from the same being, we have mental connections to each other and can communicate every now and then, she said, pulling back the curtain to reveal what she had chosen to wear for the night. Seeing what Akane had worn made Tenten's eyes widen before she smirked. Akane-chan, I do believe that what you have on will wow Naru-kun tonight, she said, and then her look turned to contemplative. Now all we have to do is find something for E to wear, she said, looking around the room full of kimonos, with Naruto just outside of the training field. Naruto gulped nervously as he walked up to the training field. He was wearing a formal black kimono that had a design of a red nine-tailed fox sitting on the back with its tails spread out behind it. He had been worrying about how the girls would react to what he had planned for the night. He just hoped that they liked it. But his thoughts were cut off when he spotted the two waiting for him, and his eyes widened when he saw what they had on, and all he could say was, beautiful. Tenten was wearing a purple kimono that had flower petals on it. Her outfit had a small V-neck that showed just enough cleavage to make his eyes drawn to it, but not overly so. Her hair, which had been in her twin buns earlier that day, had been let down and braided into two braids that went to her mid-back. Akane had on a dark blue kimono that had a design of swans flying all over. It had a bit more of a V-neck than Tenten's, but not too much more. Her hair, which was usually down to her shoulders, was done up into a bun. He also noticed that she had genjutsu hiding her fox features. Overall, they looked absolutely stunning. The girls, seeing Naruto staring at them, smirked to each other. Mission make Naru-kun wowed beyond belief accomplished, they thought as one, and then blushed when they heard what he said. Though they had to admit that he looked quite good as well. Naruto snapped out of his wowed state when Tenten waved her hand in front of his face, and he blushed when he realized that he had been staring. So should we get going? He asked nervously. The girls looked at each other and nodded. Yes, Akane said with a happy smile on her face. With that, they joined their arms with his and walked off the training field. 10 minutes later. Naruto-kun, how did you possibly get a reservation to this place? A surprised Tenten asked in shock. They were standing in front of the most popular restaurant in Konoha called the Golden Leaf, a very big restaurant that had 2 floors, the first mainly being a dance floor with some dining tables around it, and the second was for dining alone that had a great view of the village. Naruto just smirked and mysteriously said, I have my ways, Ten-chan, I have my ways. And with that he led them into the restaurant and up to the reservation desk, and said, "Reservation for Uzumaki." The waiter looked into his book before looking up and said, "Uzumaki reservation for 3, come right this way." And led them up onto the second floor next to a window. "Your server will be with you momentarily," the waiter said, handing them their menus as they sat and walked away. "Okay, spill Naruto-kun, how did you get reservations to this place?" Akane said with narrow eyes that were mirrored by Tenten and were pointed directly at him. Naruto shivered a little before he explained, "Well, you see, Akane-chan, I happen to know the owner, and he's one of the few that don't hate me, and he set me up with the reservation," he nervously said, starting to sweat a little under both his girlfriend's gazes. Akane and Tenten looked at each other a bit and then nodded their heads in acceptance. Naruto sighed in relief when they looked at their menus. Girls are scary, he thought with a sweat drop, glad that when Akane was out of the seal she didn't have a connection to his thoughts. He looked up from his own menu when he heard the server approaching the table. "Hello, may I take your order?" the cheery girl said. "Yes, I would like the gyoza, with a side of miso soup, and some sencha green tea to drink," Tenten said, placing her menu on the table. "Some tempura, with a side of fried rice, and gyokuro tea to drink please," Akane said, putting her menu down on Tenten's. "Yakizakana, a side of yakisoba, with matcha tea for the drink," Naruto said, handing the server all of the menus. The server wrote their orders down and nodded with a smile never leaving her face. "Very well, your meals will be ready momentarily," she said and walked away. "So Naruto-kun," Akane started making him look at her. "How did you meet the owner?" she asked, causing Tenten to perk up in curiosity. She was as curious as Akane was. Naruto took a moment to remember how he met the man before speaking. "Well, I met Kagari-san when I was digging through the trash looking for food. He had been taking the trash out for the day and saw me. He didn't hate me, so he ended up feeding and sheltering me for the night. The next morning he took me to see the Hokage. Oddly enough, the next day I got my apartment. I repaid him with the occasional odd job here and there," he said in remembrance with a small smile on his face. Akane and Tenten, who had looked down at his reference to his past, could only think, "He looks like he's at peace right now." And it was true. Naruto's small smile and the far-off look in his eyes made him look at peace with the world. "Okay, I have got to meet this guy. To cause such a reaction from Naruto-kun, he must be a really good person," Akane thought. Tenten's were along the same line. They were snapped out of their thoughts when their food and drinks arrived and were sat in front of them. "Here's your meals, I hope you enjoy them," the cheery server said before walking off. The meal passed by with them mostly getting to know Akane better, seeing as Naruto and Tenten had known each other for years. They learned even though she was the strongest of the tailed beasts in the beginning, there were some of the others that thought that she couldn't handle the position, but were quickly put in their place when she had demonstrated her power. And that the reason that the Kitsune clan had never had a summoner up till now was mostly to her being sealed for the last 100 years or so, and both Mito and Kushina had both had summoning contracts that weren't allied to them, making it near impossible for them to sign it. What Akane learned from Tenten was that she liked every kind of weapon there was and one day hoped to have wielded them all. She also learned that Tenten hoped to one day settle down and raise a family just like Naruto did, and said Blonde was left a blushing mess when she said that it was him that she hoped it was with, to which Akane just smirked and reminded her that she would be the one getting him first, further embarrassing him. They knew Naruto already, one having been sealed inside of him and having gone through most of his memories, not the bad ones, the good ones she still doesn't know how bad it got sometimes, and the other being with him for the better part of 14 years, counting before they came back in time, so they just asked what he planned on doing this time around. He explained what he planned on doing, for instance saving Gigi, stopping Orochimaru from giving Sasuke the curse seal, and hopefully saving the one that had once been his friend. "Why would you want to save that asshole? Especially after all he's done?" Tenten asked. "Tenten, when you stop and think about it, that was a Sasuke that doesn't exist yet, so if I can stop him from getting the curse mark, then I can stop him from defecting from the village," Naruto explained with a sigh at the beginning. Tenten realized what he meant by that and accepted his answer, but not before she had her say in it. "Okay, I get that, Naruto-kun, but if you can't, then please promise me that you'll kill him before everything gets out of hand again. I would hate to see all the hard work that we're putting into this go to waste," she asked with worry-filled eyes, Akane nodding in agreement. Naruto nodded his head in acceptance before he stood up from his empty plate and held his hands out to both of them. Now that is done, would either of you like to dance? He asked, making them both blush but grow grins and accept his invitation. Yes, let's dance. They both said, grasping a hand each. Naruto smiled as he led them to the dance floor, once again thinking, how in the world did I get this lucky? The rest of the night was filled with laughter and dancing.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.